ताज़ा तरीन अपलोड्स की नोटिफिकेशन हासिल करने के लिए हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें और साथ में दिए गए घंटी के निशान को दबाना ना भूलें।
Charming women railed in sweet strains and poured innuendos. The gods felt much amused to hear them and dined for an unusually long time. The joy that swelled at the dinner cannot be described even with millions of tongues. Having been served with water for rinsing their mouths at the end of the dinner, they were given betel leaves and then they returned to their respective lodgings. The 7 sages called once more and read out to Himavan the note recording the time fixed for the wedding. The perceiving that the hour had arrived, the latter sent for the gods. Himavan politely sent for the gods and assigned an appropriate seat to each one of them. An altar was prepared in accordance with the Vedic ritual, and women chanted charming festal strains. A divinely beautiful throne with the images of a pair of lions for its arms was placed on the altar, being a handiwork of the Creator himself. It beggared description. Bowing his head to the Brahmanas and calling to his mind his own master, the Lord of Raghus, Shivji took his seat on the throne. The great sages then sent for Umaji, who was brought in by her girl companions richly adorned. All the gods were enraptured at her beauty. What poet in the world could describe such loveliness? Recognizing in her the mother of the universe and spouse of Shivji, the divinities mentally bowed to her. The perfection of beauty that Bhavaniji was could not be adequately praised even with millions of tongues. The superb beauty of the mother of the universe could not be described even with millions of tongues. When even the Vedas, Sesha, the serpent god, and Shardaji, the goddess of learning, shrink abashed, of what account is the dull-witted Tulsidas ji? Mother Bhavani ji, the mind of beauty, walked to the middle of the pavilion where Shivji was. Out of shyness, she could not gaze on her Lord's lotus feet, although her heart was fixed thereon like a bee. As the direction of the sages, Shambhuji and Bhavaniji paid divine honors to Lord Ganpatiji. Let no one be puzzled to hear this, for one should bear in mind that gods have existed from time without beginning. The great sages had the nuptial ceremony performed in all its details as laid down in the Vedas. Taking sacred kusagras in his hand and holding the bride by her hand, the mountain king Himalaya made her over to Shivji, knowing her to be his eternal consort. When the great Lord Shivji took the hand of the bride, all the great gods were glad at heart. The principal sages chanted the Vedic formulas, while the gods exclaimed, "Victory! Victory! All victory to Shankarji!" Musical instruments of various kinds were sounded, and flowers of different varieties were rained down from the heavens. The wedding of Hara and Girija was thus concluded. A spirit of rejoicing pervaded the whole universe. Men servants and maid servants, horses, the chariots, elephants and cows, raiment, jewels and various other articles, even so cartloads of food grains and gold utensils were given as dowry, which was more than one could describe. Himachala gave presents of various kinds as dowry. Then, joining his palms, he said, "I have nothing to give, Shankarji. You have all your desires sated." He could say no more and remained clasping the latter's feet. The ocean of mercy that Shivji is reassured his father-in-law in every possible way. Then Menaji, with a heart overflowing with love, clasped his lotus feet and said, "O Lord, Uma is dear to me as life. Take her as a maidservant of your house and forgive all her faults. Be pleased to grant this boon to me." Shambhuji comforted his mother-in-law in ways more than one, and she returned home bowing her head at his feet. The mother then sent for Uma and taking her into her lap gave her the following excellent advice. "Ever adore the feet of Shankarji. This sums up the duty of a wife. Her husband is her deity. There is no other god for her." As she spoke these words, her eyes filled with tears and she pressed the girl to her bosom. Why has God created women in this world? One who is dependent on others can never dream of happiness. The mother was overwhelmed with emotion, but knowing as she did that it was not an opportune moment for betraying one's weakness, she recovered herself. Menaji met Parvati ji again and again and fell down clasping the girl's feet. Her supreme love was beyond all words. Bidding adieu to all the ladies, Bhavani ji ran and clung to her mother's breast once more. Taking leave of her mother once more, Bhavani ji departed. Everyone uttered appropriate blessings to her. She often turned back to have a look at her mother. Her girl companions then took her to Shivji. Having gratified all beggars, Shankarji proceeded to his home, Mount Kailas, with Umaji. All the divinities delightfully rained down flowers and kettle drums produced a charming sound in heavens. Himavan then accompanied Shivji in order to escort him with great affection. Shivji, however, sent him back, consoling him in various ways. "I have come to know your virtues and disposition. Listen, therefore, while I narrate the story of the Lord Raghu's, O sage, I cannot say how glad I am at this meeting with you today. O Lord of sages, the exploits of Shri Ramji are much beyond measure. Even 1,000 million Seshas, serpent kings, cannot recount them. Nevertheless, fixing my thoughts on the Lord who wields a bow in his hand and is the Lord of speech, I repeat the tale as I have heard it. Shardaji, the goddess of speech, is like a puppet, while Shri Ramji, the inner controller of all, is the matter of the puppet show, who holds the strings in his hands. When he blesses a poet, knowing him to be a devotee, he causes the goddess to dance in the courtyard of his heart. To him, the benevolent Lord Raghus, I bow and commence the recital of his fair virtues. Of all mountains the most charming and the best in Kailas, where Shivji and Umaji eternally dwell. Hosts of Sidhaas, ascetics and yogis, as well as gods, kinnaras and sages, all lucky souls reside there and adore Shivji, the root of all joy. Those who have their faces turned away from Hari and Hara and have no love for righteousness cannot even dream of going there. On the summit of that mountain exists a huge banyan tree, which is ever young and is charming during all seasons. Fanned by cool, soft and fragrant breeze, its shade is ever refreshing. It is the favorite resort of Shivji, extolled by the Vedas. Once upon a time, the Lord betook himself beneath the tree and was much gladdened at heart to see it. Spreading his tiger skin on the ground with his own hands, the all-merciful Shivji sat down casually. His body fair in hue as the jasmine, the moon and the conch shell, arms of inordinate length, a hermit's covering consisting of the bark of trees wrapped round his loins, his feet resembling a pair of full-blown red lotuses, and their toenails shedding a luster which dispelled the darkness of the devotee's heart. Serpents and the ashes serving as ornaments of the slayer of Tripura, and his countenance eclipsing the splendor even of the autumnal full moon. With his twisted coils of hair for a crown, and the celestial stream, the Ganga, adorning his head, eyes as big as a pair of lotuses, throat dark with poison, and with the crescent shining on his brow, the Lord looked like a veritable mine of beauty. Seated there, the destroyer of Cupid looked like an incarnation of the sentiment of quietism. Finding it a good opportunity, Mother Bhavaniji called on Shambhuji. In recognition of her wifely love, Lord Hara showed her great courtesy and assigned her a seat on his left side. Parvati ji gladly sat down beside Shivji and recalled the history of her past life. Presuming that her Lord cherished in his heart greater love for her than before, Umaji smilingly spoke the following sweet words to him. The daughter of Himalaya sought to elicit from her Lord the story which is profitable to the whole world. O Lord of the universe, O my Master, O Slayer of the demon Tripura, your glory is known to all the three spheres, animate as well as inanimate beings, Nagas, men and gods all do homage to your lotus feet. My Lord, you are all powerful, all wise and all blissful. You are a repository of all arts and virtues and a storehouse of yoga, wisdom, dispassion. Your name is a wish-yielding tree, as it were, to the suppliant. O blissful Lord, if you are pleased with me and know me to be your faithful servant, then, my Master, disperse my ignorance by repeating to me the various stories of the Lord of Raghus. Why should he, who has his abode beneath a wish-yielding tree, undergo the suffering born of want? Bearing this in mind, O Lord, with the crescent on the forehead, dispel the great confusion of my mind. O Lord, the sages who discourse on the supreme reality speak of Ramji as the Brahmaji who has no beginning. Sesha and Shardaji, as well as the Vedas and the Puranas, all sing praises of the Lord of Raghus. You too, O subduer of love, reverently repeat the word Ramji night and day. Is this Ramji the same, the son of the king of Ayodhya, or some other unborn, unqualified and imperceptible being? If a king's son, how could he be Brahmaji, the infinite? And if he were Brahmaji, how could his mind get unhinged by the loss of his wife? When I see his acts on the one hand and hear of his glory on the other, my mind gets utterly confused. If, my Lord, there is any other desireless, all-pervading, all-powerful Brahmaji, instruct me about the same. Be not angry at my folly, but take steps to wipe out my ignorance. In the wood, in my previous birth, I witnessed Shri Ramji's glory. Although I was too awe-stricken to tell you, yet my mind was so impure that I did not understand, and I reaped a good return for my folly. Some doubt still lingers in my mind. Be gracious to me. I implore you with joined palms. Lord, you instructed me then in ways more than one, yet I did not understand. Do not allow this thought to anger you. I have no such delusion now. I find developed in me a taste for hearing the story of Ramji. Recount the sacred virtues of Shri Ramji, O Lord of immortals, having the serpent king Sesha for an ornament. Placing my head on the ground, I adore your feet and entreat you with joined palms to recount the unsullied glory of the chief of Raghus, giving in substance the conclusion of the revealed texts, the Vedas, on the subject. Though as a woman I am not qualified to hear it, I am your servant in thought, word and deed. Saints do not withhold even an esoteric truth wherever they find a man smitten with agony, and therefore qualified to receive it. I ask you with a heart so distressed, be gracious enough to narrate the story of the Lord of Raghus. First tell me, after a mature thought, what makes the unqualified Brahmaji assume a qualified form? Then, my Lord, relate the story of Shri Ramji's descent and tell me next the charming exploits of his childhood. Then let me know how he wedded Janaka's daughter Sitaji and the fault for which he had to renounce his father's kingdom later on. Then describe the innumerable deeds performed by him while he lived in the forest. And further tell me, my Lord, how he killed Rawan. Then relate, O blissful Shankarji, all the numerous sports that were enacted by him after his coronation. Thereafter relate, O gracious Lord, the miracle wrought by Ramji, that is, how that jewel of Raghu's line proceeded to his divine abode along with all his subjects. Then expound, my Lord, the truth in the realization of which enlightened sages remained absorbed, and thereafter discuss in detail the conceptions of devotion, Gyan, or knowledge of the formless absolute, Vigyan, or the knowledge of qualified divinity with and without form, and dispassion. Over and above this, O Lord of purest understanding, reveal to me the many other mysteries connected with Ramji. And if there be anything which I have omitted to ask, do not keep it back, my gracious Lord. You are the preceptor of all the three spheres, so declare the Vedas. What can other poor creatures know? Shivji was glad at his heart to hear these questions of Umaji, naturally pleasing and guileless as they were. All the exploit of Ramji flashed on his mind. The hair on his body bristled with rapture and his eyes filled with tears. The figure of Shri Ramji was reflected on the mirror of his heart. This brought immense joy to Shivji, who is an embodiment of supreme bliss himself. For an hour or so, Shivji was lost in the ecstasy of meditation. He then recovered himself and thereafter began joyfully to tell the story of Ramji. Due to lack of knowledge about Shri Ramji, even the unreal passes for real, just as ignorance about a rope leads us to mistake it for a snake. Even so, the moment we know him, the world of master vanishes, just as the delusion of a dream disappears as soon as we wake up. Him do I reverence in the form of child, the repetition of whose name brings all kinds of success within our easy reach. May that home of bliss and vein of woe take compassion on me, he who sports in the courtyard of King Dashrath. After thus paying homage to Ramji, the slayer of demon Tripura joyfully spoke in mellifluous accents as follows. You are indeed blessed with worthy of the applause. O daughter of the Mountain King, there is no such benefactor as you. You have asked me to repeat the history of the Lord of Raghus, which is potent enough to sanctify all the spheres, even as the Ganga purifies the whole world. You are full of love for the feet of the hero of Raghu's race. You have put questions to me only with an eye to the good of the world. By the blessing of Ramji, O Parvati, not even in dream can grief, infatuation, doubt or error enter your mind, so far as I can judge. Yet you have expressed the same doubts again, so that all those who repeat or hear this account may be benefited thereby. The ears of those who have never heard the stories of Sri Hari are no better than snake holes. The eyes of those who have not blessed them with the sight of saints are as good as the sham eyes on a peacock's tail. The heads that bow not at the souls of Sri Hari or of one's preceptor are just like bitter pumpkins. Those who have cherished not in their heart the spirit of devotion to Sri Hari are as good as dead, though living. The tongue that does not sing the praises of Ramji is just like the tongue of a frog. The heart which does not rejoice to hear the tales of Sri Hari is hard as adamant and cruel indeed. Hear, O Girija, the exploits of Sri Rama, which proves beneficial to the gods and mystify the demons. Like the cow of plenty, the story of Ramji bestows all blessings on those who devote themselves to it, and assemblages of saints are the various abodes of gods. Knowing this, who would not listen to it? The story of Ramji is the lovely clasp of the hand palms which scares away the birds of doubt. Even so, the story of Ramji is an axe to the tree of Kali Yuga, the impurities of the Kali Yuga. Listen to it with reverence, O daughter of the Mountain King. The charming names of Sri Ramji, as well as his virtues, stories, birth and deeds have all been declared by the Vedas to be beyond number. As there is no end to the divine Ramji, even so his stories, glory and virtues are also endless. Yet, seeing your great love, I will tell them even as I have heard of them to the best of my intensity. Uma, your inquiries are naturally winning and delightful, and as such are approved of by the saints. As for myself, I am particularly pleased to hear them. But there was one thing, Bhavani, which I did not like, although you uttered it under a spell of delusion. You suggested that Ramji, whom the Vedas extol and on whom the sages contemplate, is someone else. Such words are spoken and heard by those wild men alone, who are possessed by the devil infatuation, are impious and averse to the feet of Sri Hari, and know no difference between the truth and the falsehood. Foolish, ignorant and blind wretches, the mirror of whose heart is clouded by the film of sensuality, lecherous, deceitful and grossly perverse, who have never seen an assemblage of holy men even in dream, and who have no sense of gain and loss. They alone make statements which are repugnant to the Vedas. The mirror of their heart is soiled, and they have no eyes to see. How then can those wretched souls behold the beauty of Sri Ramji? For those who have no knowledge either of the unqualified Brahmaji or of qualified divinity, who indulge in fantastic utterances of various kinds and who spin round in this world under the influence of Sri Hari's deluding potency, No assertion is too absurd to make. Those who are delirious of mad, those who are possessed, and those who are inebriated do not talk sense. None should give ear to the ravings of those who have drunk the wine of infatuation. Thus, assured in your heart, discard all doubts and adore Shri Ramji's feet. O daughter of the Mountain King, hear my words, which are sunbeams as if were for the darkness of error. There is no difference between qualified divinity and the unqualified Brahmaji. So declare the sages and men of wisdom, the Vedas and the Puranas. That which is attributeless and formless and imperceptible and unborn becomes qualified under the influence of the devotee's love. How can the absolute become qualified? In the same way as water and the hailstone are no different in substance. Infatuation is out of question for him whose very name is like the sun to the darkness of error. Shri Ramji, who in truth, consciousness and bliss combined, is like the sun. The night of ignorance cannot subsist in him, even to the smallest degree. He is the Lord whose very being is light. There is no dawn understanding in his case, for the dawn presupposes night, and night there is none in the sunlight of Shri Ramji. Joy and grief, knowledge and ignorance, egoism and pride, these are the characteristics of Jiva, infinite being. Shri Ramji is the all-pervading Brahmaji. He is supreme bliss personified, the highest Lord and the most ancient being. The whole world knows it. He who is universally known as the Spirit, the fount of light, manifest in all forms, and is the Lord of life as well as of matter. That jewel of Raghu's line is my master. So saying, Shivji bowed his head to him. Fools do not perceive their own error. On the other hand, those stupid creatures attribute infatuation to the Lord. Just as on seeing the sky covered with clouds, men of unsound judgment declare that the sun has been screened by the clouds. To him who sees with finger stuck into his eyes, the moon appears as double. Umaji, infatuation is attributed to Ramji in the same way as darkness, smoke or dust appears in the sky. The objects of the senses and their presiding deities, as well as the Jiva, embodied soul, all these derive their illumination one from the other. That is to say, the objects are illumined by the senses are illumined by their presiding deities, and the deities presiding over the senses are illumined by the conscious self. The supreme illuminator of them all is the eternal Ramji, King of Ayodhya. The world of matter is the object of illumination, while Ramji is its illuminator. He is the Lord of Maya and the abode of wisdom and virtues. It is due to his reality that even unconscious matter appears as real through ignorance. Just as a shell is mistaken for silver and a mirage for water, even though the appearance is false at all times, in the past, present and future, nobody can dispel this delusion. In a like manner, in this world of matter, superimposed on Hari, though unreal, it gives us pain nonetheless. Just as if a man's head is cut off in dream, he is not rid of pain till he wakes Girija. He whose grace wipes out such delusion is none else than the benevolent Lord of Raghus. Nobody has been able to discover his beginning or end. Basing their conclusions on speculation, the Vedas have described him in the following words. He walks without feet, hears without ears, and performs actions of various kinds even without hands. He enjoys all tastes without a mouth, and he is a most clever speaker even though devoid of speech. He touches without a body, sees without eyes, and catches all odors even without a nose. His ways are thus supernatural in every respect, and his glory is beyond description. He who is thus extolled by the Vedas and men of wisdom, and whom the sages love to contemplate, is no other than the divine Ramji, son of Dashratha, lord of Ayodhya, the friend of his devotees. When I behold any creature dying in the holy Kashi, the modern Varanasi, it is by the power of his name that I rid of all sorrow. He is my Lord, the chief of Raghus, the sovereign of all creation, animate as well as inanimate, the witness of all hearts. If men repeat his name even in a helpless state, sins committed by them in a series of previous existences are burnt away, while those who devotedly remember him are able to cross the ocean of mundane existence as if it were a mere hollow made by the hoof of a cow. Ramji is no other than that Supreme Spirit. Bhavani, your assertion that he is subject to delusion is wholly unwarranted. The moment a man harbors such a doubt in his mind, his wisdom, dispassion, and all other virtues bid adieu to him. When Parvati ji heard Shivji's illuminating words, the whole structure of her sophistry collapsed. Attachment and devotion to the feet of the Lord of Raghus sprang in her heart, and her shocking incredulity disappeared. Clasping the lotus feet of her Lord again and again, and joining her lotus-like palms, Parvati ji spoke the following fine words, steeping them as it were in the nectar of love. Now that I have listened to your words, which were refreshing as moonbeams, my ignorance, like the feverish heat of the autumnal sunshine, has faded away. You have removed all my doubt, O gracious Lord, and the reality of Ramji has been revealed to me. By your grace, my Lord, my gloom has been lifted, and I feel happy now by the blessing of my Lord's feet. Now, regarding me as your slave, even though I am a woman, ignorant and stupid by nature, answer my former question, if you are pleased with me, my Lord. Ramji, I now understand, is no other than the indestructible Brahmaji, who is consciousness itself, and who, though bereft of all, yet dwells in the heart of all. Why did he take the form of a human being? Explain this to me, O Shankarji. Hearing Umaji's most polite words and seeing her unadulterated love for the story of Ramji, the all-merciful and all-wise Shankarji, the destroyer of Cupid, was glad at heart, and extolling Umaji in so many ways, said, Hear the blessed story of the holy Ram Charit Manas, which was narrated at length by the sage Bhusundiji and heard by the king of birds, Garuda. I shall tell you later on how that great dialogue took place. First, listen to the most charming and sanctifying story of his descent. The virtues, names, stories, the forms of Shri Hari are all unlimited, innumerable and immeasurable. Yet I proceed to tell them according to the best of my intellectual capacity. Listen, Uma, with reverence. Hark, O Girija, the Vedas and the Tantras have sung numerous charming and sinless exploits of Shri Hari. The cause of Shri Hari's descent cannot be precisely stated. Listen, O sensible lady, Shri Ramji is beyond the grasp of intellect, mind or speech. Such is my conviction. Yet, O charming lady, I tell you the reason as I understand it, and even as the saints and the sages, the Vedas and the Puranas have stated according to their intellectual level. Whenever virtue declines and vile and haughty demons multiply and the work uniquely that cannot be told, and whenever Brahmanas, cows, gods and earth itself are in trouble, the gracious Lord assumes various forms and relieves the distress of the virtuous. Killing the demons, he reinstates the gods, preserves the bounds of propriety fixed by the Vedas, which represent his own breath, and diffuses his immaculate glory throughout the world. This is the motive of Shri Ramji's descent. Singing this glory, the devotees cross the ocean of mundane existence. It is for the sake of his devotees that the compassionate Lord bodies himself forth. The motives of Shri Ramji's birth are many, each more wonderful than the other. I will refer to one or two such births at length. Please listen attentively, O wise Bhavani. Shri Hari has two favorite gatekeepers, Jaya and Vijaya, who are known to everybody. Due to the curse of certain Brahmanas, both these brothers were born in the accursed species of demon. One of them was known as Hiranyakashipu and the other as Hiranyaksha. They became known throughout the universe as the tamers of the pride Indra. Both of them were celebrated heroes who came out victorious in the battle. The Lord assumed the form of a boar in order to kill one of the two brothers. While bodying himself forth as the man-lion, he killed the other, Hiranyakashipu, and spread the fair renown of his devotee, Prahlad. It is these two brothers that were born again as the powerful and most valiant Rakshasas, Rawan and Kumbhakarna, who were great warriors and, as all the world knows, conquered even gods. Even though slain by the Lord, the two brothers, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, did not attain liberation, for the Brahmanas had doomed them to 3 births. It was on their account that the lower of the devotees bodied himself forth on one occasion. In that birth, Kashyap and Aditi were his parents, who were known by the names of Dashrath and Kausalya respectively. This was how in one kalpa, that is, round of creation, the Lord descended from heaven and performed purifying deeds on earth. In another kalpa, all the gods were worsted in their conflict with the demon Jalandhara. Seeing their distress, Shambhuji waged war against them, which knew no end. But the demon, who possessed a great might, could not be killed in spite of his best effort. The wife of the demon chief was a most virtuous lady. Armed by her strength of character, the demon could not be conquered even by the vanquisher of Tripura. By a stratagem, the Lord broke her vow of chastity and accomplished the purpose of the gods. When the lady discovered the trick, she cursed him in her wrath. The sportive and gracious Lord accepted her curse. It was this Jalandhara who was reborn as Rawan in this latter kalpa. Killing him in battle, Shri Ramji conferred on him the supreme state. This was the reason why Shri Ramji assumed a human form in one particular birth. Hark, O Bharadwaj, the story of each birth of the Lord has been sung by poets in diverse ways. On one occasion, Narad ji cursed the Lord. This served as an excuse of his birth in one particular kalpa. Girija was taken aback to hear these words and said, Naradji is a votary of God Vishnuji, an enlightened soul too. Wherefore did the sage pronounce a curse? What offence had Lakshmiji's lord committed against him? Tell me the whole story, O slayer of the demon Tripura. It is very strange that the sage should have fallen a prey to delusion. The great Lord Shivji then replied with a smile, there is no one enlightened or deluded. Man instantly becomes what the Lord of Raghus wills him to be at a particular moment. Said Yagyavalkya, I am going to recount the virtues of Ramji, O Bharadwaj. Listen with a devout mind. Renouncing pride and intoxication, O Tulsidas, adore the Lord of Raghus, who puts an end to metempsychosis. In the Himalaya mountains, there was a most sacred cave. The beautiful heavenly stream Ganga flowed nearby. The sight of this most holy, charming hermitage highly attracted the mind of the celestial sage Naradji. Seeing the mountain, the river, and the forest glades, his heart developed love for the feet of Lakshmiji's Lord. The thought of Sri Hari broke the spell of the curse pronounced by Dakshji, which did not allow him to stay at one place, and his mind, which was naturally sinless, fell into a trance. Seeing the sage's condition, Indra, the chief of gods, became apprehensive. Summoning the god of love, he received him with great honor and said, for my sake, go with your associates. The god of love, who has a fish emblazoned on his standard, set out gladdened at heart. Indra apprehended that the celestial sage sought to occupy his abode. Those who are lustful and grasping are afraid of everyone like the evil-minded crow. On seeing a king of beasts should run away with a dry bone, fearing in his crass ignorance lest the lion should rob him of it. Indra too, in his shamelessness, thought as above. When the god of love reached that hermitage, he created a semblance of vernal season by his illusionary power. Many colored blossoms appeared on the trees of different kinds. Cuckoos sang and bees hummed. Delightful breezes, cool, soft, and fragrant, blew, fanning the flame of passion. Rambha and other heavenly damsels who looked ever young and were all past masters in amorous sports, sang in undulating tones of various kinds and sported in many ways, ball in hand. The god of love was delighted to see his associates there and employed a variety of deceptive tricks. But the amorous devices had no effect on the sage. Guilty Cupid was now apprehensive of his own destruction. Can anyone dare to trespass the bounds of him who has the Lord of Lakshmiji as his great protector? In dire dismay, the god of love with his accomplices acknowledged his defeat and clasped the sage's feet, addressing him in accents of deep humility. There was no anger in Naradji's mind. He reassured the god of love by addressing him in a friendly terms. Then, bowing his head at the sage's feet and obtaining his leave, Love retired with his accomplices. Reaching the court of Indra, the chief of gods, he related his own doings on the one hand and sage's clemency on the other. Hearing the tale, all were astonished. They extolled the sage and bowed their head to Hari. Then Naradji called on Shivji. He was proud of his victory over love and told him all love's doings. Knowing him to be his most beloved friend, the great Lord Shivji admonished him as follows. O sage, I pray you again and again, never repeat this story to Hari, as you have repeated it to me. Even if the topic ever comes up before him, please hush it up. Wholesome was the advice given by Shambhuji, but it did not please Naradji. Bharadwaj, Now, hear what interesting thing happened. The will of Hari is dominant. The will of Shri Ramji alone prevails. There is no one who can alter it. Shambhuji's advice fell flat on the sage. Then he went to the abode of Brahmaji, the creator, singing the glories of Shri Hari to the accompaniment of the excellent lute he had in his hand. The Lord of Sages, Naradji, who was skilled in music, once repaired to ocean of milk, where dwells the abode of Lakshmiji, Bhagwan Narayan, who is the Vedanta, the crown of all Vedas personified. The abode of Ramji rose to meet him in great joy and shared his seat with sage. The Lord of the entire creation, animate as well as inanimate, said with a smile, "It is after a long time that you have showed me this favor, Reverend Sir." Naradji told him all the doings of love, even though Shivji had already forbidden him to do so. Most formidable is the Maya, deluding potency of the Lord of Raghus. No one was ever born in this world who is beyond its charm. With an impressive look, yet in coaxing accents, said the Lord, "By your very thought, self-delusion, lust, arrogance, and pride disappear. Hark, O sage, the mind of him alone is susceptible to delusion, whose heart is devoid of wisdom and dispassion. You are steadfast in your vow of celibacy and resolute of mind. You can never be smitten with pangs of love." Naradji replied with a feeling of pride, "Lord, it is all due to your grace." The compassionate Lord pondered and saw that a huge tree of pride had sprouted in his heart. "I shall soon tear it up by roots, for it is my vow to serve the best interest of my servants. I must contrive some plan which may do good to the sage and serve as a diversion for me." Then, bowing his head at the feet of Shri Hari, Naradji departed. The pride in his heart had swelled. The Lord of Lakshmiji, the goddess of prosperity, then set his Maya into operation. Now, hear of her relentless doings. The Lord's Maya, deluding potency, created on the way a city with an area of 800 square miles. The manifold architectural beauties of that city excelled even those of Vishnuji's own capital, Vaikunth. It was inhabited by graceful men and women, whom you would take to be many incarnations of the god of love and his wife Rati. A king, Shilnidhi by name, ruled over that city. He owned numberless horses, elephants, and troops. He possessed the grandeur and luxury of 100 Indras, and was a repository of grace, splendor, might, and wisdom. He had a daughter, Vishwamohini by name, whose beauty enraptured even Lakshmiji. She was no other than Shri Hari's own Maya, enrapturing potency, the fountainhead of all virtues. Who can describe her charm? The princess was going to marry by self-choice. Hence, kings beyond number arrived there as suitors. The supportive sage Naradji entered the city and inquiring everything from the people. Hearing all that had been going on there, he wended his way to the king's palace. The king paid him homage and gave him a seat. Seeing her beauty, the sage forgot all about his dispassion and remained gazing on her for a long time. When he read the auspicious marks on her body, he was lost in reverie. He was gladdened at heart, but he would not openly mention the happy characteristics. "He who weds this girl," he said to himself, "shall become immortal, and no one shall be able to conquer him in battle. He whom Shilnidhi's daughter selects for her lord shall be adored by the entire creation, both animate and inanimate. Having read these characteristics, the sage kept them to himself and mentioned a few fabricated ones to the king. Telling the king that his daughter was of good promise, Naradji left. He thought within himself, "Let me devise and try some means whereby the princess may choose me for her husband." He had no more zeal to practice jap, muttering of sacred formulas, or austerity. "Good God, how am I to get the girl?" he said to himself. What is needed on this occasion is great personal charm and surpassing beauty, whereby the princess may be enamored of me and place the wreath of victory round my neck, he continued. "Let me ask Hari for a gift of beauty, but alas, much time will be lost in going to him. Yet I have no such friend as Hari. Let him, therefore, come to my rescue at this juncture." Then Naradji prayed in manifold ways, and lo, the abortive and merciful Lord appeared before him. The sight was soothing to the sage's eyes. He was glad at heart and felt assured that his object would be accomplished. In great humility, he told the Lord all that had happened and said, "Be gracious to me and be good enough to help me. Lord, bestow on me your own beauty. In no other way can I get possession of her. Speedily do that which may serve my best interests. I am your own servant, my Lord." Seeing the mighty power of his Maya, the Lord, who is compassionate to the poor, smiled to himself and said, "Narad, listen to me. I shall do that alone which is good to you, and nothing else. My words can never be untrue. Hark, O contemplative ascetic, if a patient distracted by his melody asks for something which is harmful to him, the physician would not give it. In a like manner, I have resolved on doing what is good to you." So saying, the Lord disappeared. Under the spell of his Maya, the sage was so mystified that he could not understand even such unambiguous words of Sri Hari. The chief of seers hastened to the spot where the arena for the choice marriage had been prepared. Richly adorned, the royal suitors had occupied their respective seats, each with his retinue. The sage was glad at heart, for he thought within himself, "My beauty is so surpassing that the princess will never commit the error of choosing for her husband anyone else than me." In the sage's own interest, the glorious Lord had made him hideous beyond description. But no one could mark the change that had taken place in him. Everyone knew him to be Naradji and greeted him as such. Two of Shivji's attendants too happened to be there. They knew the whole secret and, disguised as Brahmanas, went about seeing the fun. In the row where sat Naradji, exceedingly proud of his beauty, the two attendants of Mahesha too seated themselves. Being disguised as Brahmanas, they could not be detected. They flung sarcastic remarks at Naradji, saying, "Hari has given this man such excellent beauty that the princess will be enamored to look at it and shall certainly choose him, taking him for Hari himself." The sage was under a spell of delusion, for his heart had been stolen by love. The attendants of Shivji felt amused at this and greatly enjoyed the fun. Even though the sage heard their ironical talk, he could not follow it, his reason being clouded by infatuation. No one perceived this extraordinary phenomenon. The princess alone saw his ugly form. The moment she beheld his monkey-like face and frightful form, she was filled with rage. Accompanied by her girl companion, the princess then glided as a swan. With a wreath of victory in her lotus hands, she moved about surveying each of her royal suitors. She did not care to look even casually at the quarter in which Naradji sat elated with pride. Again and again, the sage would raise himself and fidget about. The attendants of Hara smiled to see him in that state. The gracious lord too went there in the form of a king. The princess joyfully placed the wreath of victory round his neck. The lord of Lakshmiji carried off the bride to the despair of all assembled kings. The sage felt much perturbed, for infatuation had dropped the sage of his reason. He felt as if a gem had dropped from a loosened knot in the end of his garment. The attendants of Hara then smilingly said, "Just look at your face in a mirror." Uttering these words, both ran away in great alarm, and the sage looked at his reflection in water. His fury knew no bounds when he beheld his form, and he pronounced a terrible curse on the attendants of Shivji. "Oh, you sinful impostors, go and be reborn as demons. You mocked me, therefore reap its rewards. Mock again a sage if you dare." Looking again in water, he saw that he had regained his real form. Yet his heart found no solace. His lips quivered, and there was indignation in his heart. At once he proceeded to where the lord of Lakshmiji was. "I shall either curse him or die at his door," he said to himself. "Seeing that he has made me a butt of ridicule throughout the world." The terror of the demons, Shri Hari, met him right on the way. He was accompanied by goddess Lakshmiji and the princess referred to above. The Lord of Immortals spoke in gentle tones. "To what destination, holy sir, are you betaking yourself like one distracted?" As soon as he heard these words, Naradji was filled with rage. Dominated as he was by Maya, there was no reason left in him. He said, "You cannot bear to look upon the good fortune of others. You are richly endowed with jealousy and fraud. While churning the ocean, you drove Rudra mad, and inciting him through the gods, you made him quaff the poison. Apportioning intoxicating liquor to the demons and poison to Shankarji. You appropriated Ramji and the lovely gem Kaustubha to yourself. You have ever been selfish and perverse and treacherous in your dealings. You are absolutely independent and subordinate to none. Therefore, you do whatever pleases your mind. You debase a good soul and redeem a vile person, and neither rejoice nor grieve over it. Deceiving everyone, you have become habituated to such tricks. You entertain no fear and are always zealous in pursuing your object. Good and evil deeds do not come in your way. No one has so far been able to correct you. You have this time played with fire and shall reap what you have sown. Take that very form in which you have imposed upon me. This is my curse. You made me look like a monkey. Therefore, you shall have monkeys for your helpmates. And as you have grievously wronged me, so shall you suffer the pangs of separation from your wife. Thus, Shri Hari's births and exploits are many. They are all charming, delightful, and marvelous. In every cycle of creation, the Lord manifests himself and enacts lovely sports of various kinds. And the great sages have on each occasion sung his story in most sacred strains, relating wonderful anecdotes of diverse kinds, hearing which the wise marvel not. Infinite is Shri Hari and infinite are his stories. Each saint sings and hears them in divergent ways. The lovely sports of Ramchandra cannot be sung even in crores of kalpas. This episode, O Bhavani ji, has been narrated by me in order to show that even enlightened sages are deluded by Shri Hari's Maya. The Lord is sportive and a friend of the suppliant. He is easy to serve and rids one of all sorrows. There is no god, man or sage whom Shri Hari's powerful Maya cannot infatuate. Bearing this in mind, one should adore the Lord of this great Maya. Here, O daughter of the Mountain King, another reason why the unbegotten, unqualified and formless Brahmaji became king of Ayodhya. I shall relate at length the marvelous story connected with it. The Lord whom you saw roaming in the forest with his brother Lakshmana in the garb of hermits, and whose doings drove you mad in the form of Satiji to such an extent that the shadow of that madness haunts you even to this day. Hear these exploits, which serve as a cure for the disease of delusion. The supportive deeds that were performed by the Lord in that birth, I shall relate them all to the best of my talents. Hearing Shankarji's words, O Bharadwaj, Umaji blushed and smiled with love. Shivji, who has a bull emblazoned on his standard, then began to relate the cause of the Lord's descent on that particular occasion. I proceed to tell you all about it, O Bharadwaj. Listen attentively. The story of Shri Ramji wipes out all the impurities of Kali Yuga, brings forth all blessings, and is most charming. Swayambhu Manu had Satrupa as wife. Of them was born this human race, fearless in God's creation. The piety and conduct of the pair were excellent. The standard of morality set up by them is sung by the Vedas even to this day. Their son was King Uttanpad, who begot the celebrated devotee of Shri Hari, Dhruva. Manu's younger son was known as Priyavrat, who is mentioned with praise by the Vedas and the Puranas. They had a daughter too, Devbhuti by name, who was the favorite consort of the sage Kardam, and who bore in her womb the all-powerful and benevolent Lord Kapila, the primal divinity, who is compassionate to the humble and who openly expounded the philosophy of Sankhya, an adept as he was in the enquiry after the ultimate principles. The said Manu ruled for a long period and followed the Lord's commandments in the form of scriptural ordinance in every way. I have reached the fourth stage of my life, old age, while I am still living under the roof of my house as a householder, but I have not yet lost my relish for the pleasures of senses, he said to himself. He felt sore distressed at heart that his life had been washed without devotion to Shri Hari. Manu then perforce resigned the throne to his son and departed for the forest with his wife. Preeminent of all holy places is the celebrated Naimisharanya, the modern Nimisar of Audh, which is most sacred and bestows success on those striving for realization. Multitudes of sages and adepts lived there. Glad of heart, King Manu proceeded to that place. Passing along the road, the king and queen of resolute mind looked like incarnations of spiritual wisdom and devotion respectively. On reaching the bank of the Gomati, they bathed with delight in the limpid stream. Adepts and enlightened sages came to see him, recognizing in the royal sage a champion of virtue. The sages reverently took them to all holy and lovely spots that were scattered here and there. With emancipated bodies and clad in hermetic robes, They daily listened to the Puranas in the assembly of saints. They further devotedly repeated the 12-lettered formula, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Their mind was fondly devoted to the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva, the all-pervading Vishnuji. They lived on vegetables, fruits and roots and meditated on Brahmaji, the Absolute, who is truth, consciousness and bliss combined. Again, they started undergoing penance for the sake of Shri Hari, giving up roots and fruits for water alone. Their heart ever clamored, let us see with our eyes that Supreme Lord who is without attributes, without parts and without beginning or end, who is contemplated upon by the exponents of the highest reality, whom the Vedas describes in negative terms such as not this, who is bliss itself, unconditioned and without compassion, and from a particle of whose being emanate a number of Shambhujis, Brahmajis and Vishnujis. Even such a Lord is subordinate to the will of his devotees and assumes for their sake a form suitable for sport. If the above utterance of the Vedas is true, our desire will be surely accomplished. In this way, 6,000 years elapsed even while they lived on water. Then, for another 7 millennia, they lived on air alone. For 10,000 years, they refused to inhale even air, that is, held their breath and remained standing on one leg, beholding their great penance Brahmaji, Hariji and Haraji repeatedly called on Manu and tempted him in many ways, saying, ask for a boon. But the king and queen were most resolute and did not swerve in spite of their deities' efforts to deflect them from their course. Although their frame had been reduced to a mere skeleton, there was not the least anguish in their heart. The omniscient Lord, now recognizing the king and queen as his own servants, the ascetic couple solely depended on him. In the meantime, a most deep voice thundered from heaven, ask for a boon. The voice was steeped in the nectar of compassion and was so charming that it infused life into the dead. Entering through the cavity of the ears, when it reached their very heart, they found their body attractive, animated, and robust as before, as if they had just returned from home. As the royal couple heard these words, which were delightful to the ear as nectar itself, the hair on their body bristled and thrill ran through their limbs. Then, falling prostrate on the ground with his heart overflowing with love, Manu spoke. Listen, O Lord, you are a wish-yielding tree and a cow of plenty to your servants. The dust below your feet is adored by Brahmaji, Hariji and Haraji. You are easy to serve and a fountain of all blessings. You are the protector of the suppliant and the Lord of all creation, both animate and inanimate. O friend of the forlorn, if you have any affection for us, be pleased to grant this boon to us. The form which dwells in Shivji's heart and is sought by sages, which sports like a swan in the lake of Bhusandi's mind and is glorified by the Vedas as both with and without attributes. Be gracious to us and let us feast our eyes on that form. O reliever of the distress of the suppliant, the soft and humble words of the royal couple, steeped as they were in the nectar of love, were liked by the Lord very much. Full of affection for his devotees and a storehouse of compassion, the all-powerful Lord, who pervades the whole universe, manifested himself. Billions and millions of loves blushed to behold the elegance of his swarthy form, which resembled a blue lotus. In the softness of its touch, a sapphire, in its gloss and a dark cloud in its freshness. His countenance, which resembled the autumnal full moon, was the very perfection of beauty. Lovely were his cheeks and chin, and his neck resembled the conch shell in its spiral shape. His ruddy lips, teeth, and nose were charming. His smile put to shame the rays of the moon. His eyes possessed the exquisite beauty of the fresh-blown lotuses, and his lovely glance captivated the heart. His eyebrows stole the beauty of love's bow, and sectarian mark shone on his forehead. Fish-shaped earrings hung from his earlobes, and a crown adorned his head. His curly locks looked like a swarm of bees. His breast was marked by a curl of hair and adorned with a beautiful wreath of silvern flowers. A string of precious stones and other jeweled ornaments. His strong and well-built neck resembled that of a lion, and the lovely sacred thread was suspended from it. His long, beautiful arms resembled the trunk of an elephant. The ornaments adorning them were also charming. A quiver was tied to his waist, and his hands bore an arrow and a bow. His yellow robes put to shame the streaks of lightning, and his belly had 3 folds, while his attractive navel robbed, as it were, the eddies on the Yamuna of their beauty. His lotus feet, which attract the minds of the sages like so many bees, were beyond description. On his left side shone his primordial energy, Sitaji, who is ever devoted to him, and who is a storehouse of beauty and the source of the universe. Sitaji, who stood to the left of Shri Ramji, was the same from a fragrance of whose being emanate countless Lakshmijis, Umajis, and Saraswatijis, all minds of virtues, and the mere play of whose eyebrows brings the cosmos into existence. On the form of Sri Hari, the ocean of beauty, Manu and Satrupa gazed intently with unblinking eyes. That incomparable beauty they looked on with reverence and would not feel sated with it. Overcome with joy, they lost consciousness of their body and fell flat on the ground, clasping his feet with their hands. The gracious Lord touched their heads with his own lotus hands and lifted them up at once. The compassionate Lord then said, "Knowing that I am highly pleased with you and recognizing me as a great donor, ask whatever boon you will." On hearing the words of the Lord, Manu joined his palms and, summoning courage, spoke in soft accents. "Now that we have seen your lotus feet, all our desires have been fulfilled. Yet one ardent longing still lingers in my heart. It is easy of accomplishment and at the same time hard to attain. Hence it cannot be expressed. O Lord, it is easy for you to grant it, but due to my wretched condition, it appears to me so hard to attain. Just as a pauper who has found a wish-yielding tree feels shy in asking for abundant wealth, little realizing its glory, even so my heart is possessed by doubt. Being the witness of all hearts, you know my mind. Therefore, O my master, grant my desire. O king, ask of me unreservedly. There is nothing which I would not give you. O crest gel of donors, O gracious Lord, I tell you my sincere wish, I would have a son like you. I can have nothing to conceal from you. On seeing his love and hearing his invaluable words, the compassionate Lord said, Amen. But where shall I go to find my equal? I myself, O king, shall be a son to you. Then seeing Satrupa with her hands still folded, he said, "O good lady, ask whatever boon you please." "O gracious Lord, the boon which the clever king has just asked has appealed to me much. But it is great presumption, my lord, even though such presumption is liked by you. O friend of the devotees, you are the progenitor even of Brahmajis and other gods, the Lord of the universe and the Supreme Being, who dwells within the heart of us all. Realizing this, my mind is filled with doubt. But what you have said is infallible. O my master, the bliss that is enjoyed and the goal that is reached by your own devotees. Grant me in your mercy, O Lord, that very bliss, the same destiny, the same devotion, the same attachment to your feet, the same insight and the same mode of living." Hearing the soft, pregnant, charming and excellent speech of Satrupa, the gracious Lord gently replied, "Whatever you desire, you cherish in your mind, I have granted. You should have no doubt about it. Mother, by my grace your uncommon wisdom shall never fail." Bowing at his feet, Manu again said, "Lord, I have one more request to make. Let me have attachment to your feet of the same type as one has for a son, no matter if anyone calls me a big fool. Just as a snake cannot live without the gem on its hood and a fish without water, even so let my life be dependent on you. Let me not survive without you." Asking this boon, the king remained clasping the Lord's feet till the All-Merciful said, "Let it be so. Now, obeying my command, go and dwell in the capital of Indra, the chief of gods. Having enjoyed extensive enjoyments, there you shall, after some time, be born as king of Ayodhya. Then, dear father, I will be your son. Voluntarily assuming human guise, I will manifest myself in your house. Bodying myself forth, with my rays I will perform supportive acts which will be a source of delight to my devotees. Hearing of such exploits, with reverence blessed men shall cross the ocean of worldly existence, renouncing the feeling of meum and arrogance. This Maya, who is no other than my primordial energy that has brought forth the universe, she too will manifest herself. In this way, I will accomplish your desire, and this pledge of mine shall never, never, never fail." Repeating this again and again, the gracious Lord vanished out of sight. Cherishing in their mind the image of the Lord, who is so compassionate to his devotees, the wedded couple stayed in that hermitage for some time more, and dropping their body when the time came, without the least pain, they went and looked their abode in Amravati, the city of immortals. This most sacred legend was related by Shivji to Umaji. Bharadwaj, now hear yet another cause of Shri Ramji's birth. Listen, O sage, to an old and sacred legend which was narrated by Shambhuji to Girija. There was a principality known by the name of Kaikeyi, which was celebrated throughout the world. A king named Satyaketu ruled there. He was a champion of virtue, a storehouse of political wisdom, dignified, glorious, amiable and powerful. He had 2 gallant sons who were repositories of all virtues and most staunch in battle. The elder of the 2 and the heir to the throne was named Pratap Bhanu. The other was known by the name of Harimardana, who was unequaled in strength of arm and steady in battle. There was perfect unity between the 2 brothers, and the affection each bore to the other was free from all blemish and guile. To the elder son, the king resigned the throne and withdrew himself into the forest for the sake of devotion to Shri Hari. When Pratap Bhanu became king, a proclamation to this effect was made throughout the land. He looked after his subjects with utmost care according to the precepts of the Vedas, and there was not a speck of sin anywhere in his kingdom. The Prime Minister, Dharmarishi by name, was a second Shukra and was as devoted to the king as he was wise. With a prudent counselor and a gallant and powerful brother, the king himself was an embodiment of glory and daring in war. He owned a vast army consisting of horse and foot, chariots and elephants. It had numberless excellent warriors, all of whom fought fearlessly in battle. The king rejoiced to see his army, and there was a tumultuous sound of kettle drums. He collected a special force for the conquest of the world, and availing himself of an auspicious day, marched forth with beat of drums. A number of battles were fought here and there, and all hostile kings were brought to their knees by superior might. By the strength of his arm, he reduced all the 7 sections of the terrestrial region and let the princes go on payment of tribute. Now Pratap Bhanu was the undisputed sovereign of the entire globe. Having thus subjugated the whole universe by the might of his arm, the king entered his capital. He devoted himself to the pleasures of wealth, religious practices, and sense gratification, etc. at the appropriate time. Invigorated by the King Pratap Bhanu's might, the charming earth became a cow of plenty, as it were, yielded all one's coveted products. The people were happy and free from all sorrows, and both men and women were good-looking and virtuous. The Prime Minister Dharmarishi was devoted to the feet of Shri Hari. In the interest of his royal master, he advised him on state policy every day. Preceptors, gods, saints, mains and brahmanas, the king invariably served them all. Whatever duties have been enjoined on a king in the Vedas, he gladly and devotedly performed. He bestowed gifts of various kinds every day and listened to the best scriptures, including the Vedas and the Puranas. In all holy places, he constructed many small and big wells and tanks, flower gardens and lovely orchards, dwellings for the Brahmanas and beautiful temples, wonderful architecture. Whatever sacrifices have been enjoined in the Vedas and Puranas, the king devotedly performed each one of them 1,000 times. There was no seeking for any reward in his heart. The king was a man of great intelligence and wisdom. Whatever meritorious act he performed in thought, word or deed, the wise king dedicated it to Lord Vasudeva, the all-pervading God Vishnuji. Equipping himself with all the outfit of hunting, the king mounted a gallant steed one day and, entering the dense forest of the Vindhya range, killed many a sacred deer. While ranging in the wood, he espied a wild boar. It looked as if with the moon in his mouth, the demon Rahu had hid in the forest. The orb was too large to be contained in the mouth, yet in his rage he would not disgorge it. Thus have I chosen to portray the beauty of the frightful tusks of the boar, while its body too was of an enormous size and bulk. Growing at the tramp of the horse and pricking up its ears, it gazed with a startled look. On seeing the huge boar, which resembled a purple mountain peak, the king whipped the horse and advanced rapidly, challenging the boar at the same time and saying it could no longer escape. When it saw the horse coming on with great noise, the boar took to the flight, swift as wind. The king lost no time in fitting the arrow to his bow and the boar crouched as soon as it saw the shaft. The king discharged his arrow, taking a steady aim each time, but the boar saved itself by its willingness. The beast rushed on, now hiding and now emerging into view, while the king in much excitement followed closely on its track. The boar went afar into a dense thicket, which was impenetrable by horse or elephant. Even though the king was all by himself and was faced with untold hardships in the forest, still he would not abandon the chase. Seeing the king so determined, the boar slunk away into a deep mountain cave. When the king perceived that there was no access to the cave, he had to return much disappointed, and what was worse, he lost his track in the great forest. Exhausted with much exertion and oppressed by hunger and thirst, the king and his horse kept searching for a stream or pond and almost fainted for want of water. While wandering in the forest, he espied a hermitage. In that hermitage dwelt, in the disguise of a hermit, a monarch who had been despoiled of his kingdom by Pratap Bhanu and who had run away from the field of battle, deserting his army. Knowing that the time was propitious for Pratap Bhanu and most unfavorable to his own self, he felt much disgusted at heart and refused to return home, and he was too proud to come to terms with the victor. Suppressing the anger in his own heart, the ex-king lived in the forest like a pauper in the garb of an anchorite. It was to him that King Pratap Bhanu went, and he for his part immediately recognized that the newcomer was no other than Pratap Bhanu. Overcome by thirst, the latter, however, could not recognize the ex-king. Perceiving his holy garb, Pratap Bhanu took to him to be a great sage, and getting down from his horse, made obeisance to him. The king was, however, too astute to disclose his name. Seeing King Pratap Bhanu thirsty, he showed him a good lake, and the king, as well as the horse, gladly bathed in it and drank from it. The whole fatigue was gone, and the king heaved a sigh of relief. The hermit thereafter took him back to his hermitage, and perceiving that it was sunset now, he gave him a seat and then spoke to him in polite terms. "Who are you, and wherefore do you risk your life by roaming in the forest all alone, even though you are so young and handsome? Reading the marks of an emperor on your person, I am moved with great pity. Listen, O great sage, there is a king named Pratap Bhanu. I am his minister. Ranging in pursuit of game, I have lost my way, and by great good fortune, I have been led into your presence. Your sight is a rare boon to me. It leads me to believe that something good is about to befall on me." The hermit said, "It is now dusk, my son, and your city is 560 miles away. Listen, O friend, dark and dreary is the night, and the forest is dense and trackless. Knowing this, tarry here overnight and depart next morning. The inevitable, says Tulsidas, is invariably preceded by circumstances that are favorable to it. Either it comes to a man or takes him to the cause of his doom." "Very well, my lord," the king replied, and bowing to the hermit's command, he tied up the horse to a tree and then sat down. The king extolled him in many ways, and bowing at his feet, congratulated himself. He then spoke to him in soft and endearing terms. "Regarding you as a father, my lord, I venture to address you. Looking upon me as your son and servant, O great sage, pray tell me your name in full, my master." Although the king did not recognize him, he recognized the king. While the king had a guileless heart, the hermit was a past master in fraud. Being an enemy in the first instance and a Kshatriya on top of it, and again of a royal blood, he sought to accomplish his end by dint of his cunning. Listen, O great sage, there is a king named Pratap Bhanu. I am his minister. Ranging in pursuit of game, I have lost my way, and by great good fortune I have been led into your presence. Your sight is a rare boon to me. It leads me to believe that something good is about to befall on me. The hermit said, "It is now dusk, my son, and your city is 560 miles away. Listen, O friend, dark and dreary is the night, and the forest is dense and trackless. Knowing this, tarry here overnight and depart next morning." The inevitable, says Tulsidas, is invariably preceded by circumstances that are favorable to it. Either it comes to a man or takes him to the cause of his doom. "Very well, my lord," the king replied, and bowing to the hermit's command, he tied up the horse to a tree and then sat down. The king extolled him in many ways, and bowing at his feet, congratulated himself. He then spoke to him in soft and endearing terms. "Regarding you as a father, my lord, I venture to address you. Looking upon me as your son and servant, O great sage, pray tell me your name in full, my master." Although the king did not recognize him, he recognized the king. While the king had a guileless heart, the hermit was a past master in fraud. Being an enemy in the first instance and a Kshatriya on top of it, and again of a royal blood, he sought to accomplish his end by dint of his cunning. The thought of the pleasures of royalty had made the enemy king sad. The fire of jealousy smoldered within his heart like that of a furnace. On hearing the artless words of Pratap Bhanu and recalling the grudge he had nursed against him, the hermit felt delighted at heart. He uttered the following soft yet false and artful words: "My name is now Bhikari, a mendicant, penniless and homeless as I am." The king replied, "Those who are repositories of wisdom and free from pride like you always keep their reality concealed. Even though proficient in every way, they prefer to remain in tattered clothes. That is why saints as well as the Vedas proclaim that those who are supremely indignant are held most dear by Sri Hari. Penniless and homeless beggars like you fill the minds of even Brahmaji and Shivji with doubt. Whoever you may be, I bow at your feet. Now be gracious to me, my lord." When the hermit saw the king's artless affection and extraordinary faith in him, he won him over in every way and spoke with a still greater affection. "Listen, O king, I tell you sincerely that I have dwelt here for long. No one has come to me so far, nor do I make myself known to anyone. For popular esteem is like a wildfire which consumes the forest of penance. Not only fools, say Tulsidas, but even clever men are taken in by fair appearances. Look at the beautiful peacock. Though its notes are sweet like a nectar, it devours snakes. That is why I live in the world away from the public gaze. I have little to do with anything other than Sri Hari. The Lord knows everything without being told. Tell me then, what is to be gained by humoring the world? You are sincere and intelligent and are therefore supremely dear to me, and I too have earned your affection and confidence. Now, my son, if I were to keep anything from you, I shall incur the most severe blame. The more the hermit talked of his indifference to the world, the more trustful grew the king. When the false anchorite saw the king devoted to him in thought, word and deed, he said, "My name, brother, is Ektanu." Hearing this, the king bowed his head and asked further, "Kindly explain to me the meaning of this appellation, recognizing me as your faithful servant. My birth took place at the first dawn of creation. Since then, I have never taken another body. That is why I am called Ektanu." Marvel not, my son, to hear this, for nothing is too difficult to obtain through penance. By dint of penance, Brahmaji creates the universe. By dint of penance, Vishnuji assumed the role of its protector. By dint of penance again, Shambhuji destroys the world. There is nothing in this world which cannot be attained through penance. Hearing this, the king felt much enamored, and the hermit commenced relating old legends. Having discussed topics of karma, the action, and dharma, duty, and told many legends bearing on them, he discoursed the dispassion and knowledge. And the further related at length countless marvelous stories connected with the creation, maintenance, and dissolution to the universe. Hearing all this, the king completely yielded to the influence of the hermit and then proceeded to tell him his real name. Said the hermit, "O king, I know you. Even though you tried to deceive me, I appreciated this move on your part. O king, the political maxim is that kings should not disclose their name in all cases. And when I thought of your political sagacity, I conceived great love for you. Your name is Pratap Bhanu. King Satyaketu was your father. O king, by the grace of my preceptor, I know everything. But foreseeing my own harm, I refuse to tell everything I know. When I saw your natural straightforwardness, affection, faith, and political wisdom, I conceived a spontaneous affection for you. And that is why I told you my own story on your asking. I am now pleased. Doubt not, and ask what you will, O king." Hearing these agreeable words, the king rejoiced, and clasping the hermit's feet, supplicated to him in many ways. "O gracious sage, by your very sight, I have within my grasp all the four ends of human existence. That is, religious merit, wealth, enjoyment, and final beatitude. Yes, I see my Lord so gracious, I would ask a boon which is impossible to attain otherwise, and thereby overcome sorrow. Let my body be free from old age, death, and suffering. Let no one vanquish me in battle, and let me enjoy undisputed sovereignty over the globe for 100 kalpas, and let me have no enemies." Said the anchorite, "So be it, O king. But there is one difficulty. Hear it too. Even death shall bow his head at your feet, much more those who are subject to death. The only exception shall be the Brahmanas. O ruler of the earth, the Brahmanas are ever powerful by virtue of their penance. No one can deliver from their wrath. If you can reduce the Brahmanas to your will, O king, even Brahmaji, Vishnuji, and the great Lord Shivji shall be at your command. Might is of no avail against the Brahmanas. With both arms raised to heaven, I tell you this truth. Listen, O sovereign, if you escape the Brahmanas' curse, you shall never perish." Hearing his words, the king rejoiced and said, "My lord, I shall no longer die. By your grace, O benevolent master, I shall be blessed at all times." "Amen," said the false anchorite, and added with a crafty intent, "If you tell anyone about my meeting with you, and you are straying away, the fault shall not be mine. I warn you, O king, because great harm shall befall you if you relate this incident to anyone. If this talk happens to reach a third pair of ears, I tell you the truth, you are doomed, O Pratap Bhanu. If you divulge this secret, or if a Brahmana curses you, you are undone. In no other way shall you die, even if Sri Hari and Hara get angry with you. It is true, my lord, said the king, clasping the hermit's feet. Tell me, who can deliver from the wrath of a Brahmana or a spiritual preceptor? A guru can save one even if one has evoked the wrath of Brahmaji. But in the event of a quarrel with one's preceptor, there is no one in the world who can save. If I do not follow your advice, let me perish. I care not. My mind is disturbed by only one fear. The curse of a Brahmana, my lord, is something most terrible. How shall I be able to win over the Brahmanas? Kindly let me that too. I see no friend other than you, my gracious lord. Listen, O king, there are various expedients in this world, but they are hard to accomplish and are of doubtful issue besides. Of course, there is one very simple device, but that too involves one difficulty. Its contrivance depends on me, but my going to your city is out of question. Ever since I was born, I have never been to anybody's house or village so far, and if I do not go, it will be a misfortune for you. I am therefore in a dilemma today. Hearing this, the king replied in a polite language, My lord, there is a maxim laid down in the Vedas. The great show kindness to the small. Mountains always bear tiny blades of grass on their tops. The fathomless ocean carries floating foam on its breast, and the earth ever bears dust on its bosom. So saying, the king clasped the hermit's feet and said, Be gracious to me, my master. You are a saint, compassionate to the humble. Therefore, my lord, take this trouble on my behalf. Knowing that the king was completely under his influence, the hermit, who was clever at deception, said, Listen, O king, I tell you the truth. For me in this world there is nothing hard to obtain. I'll surely accomplish your object, devoted as you are in thought, word and deed to me. The power of yoga, planning, penance and mystic formulas work only when secrecy is maintained about them. O king, if I cook food and you serve it, and if nobody comes to know me, whoever tastes the food so prepared shall become amenable to your orders. Again I tell you, whoever so dines at the house of such people shall, O king, be dominated by your will. Go and operate this scheme, O king, and take this vow for a whole year. Every day invite a new set of 100,000 Brahmanas with their families, while I, so long as your vow lasts, shall provide the daily banquet. In this way, O king, with little exertion, all the Brahmanas shall be reduced to your will. The Brahmanas in their turn will offer oblations into the sacred fire, perform big sacrifices and practice adoration, and through that channel gods too shall be easily won over. I give you one more sign. I will never come in this form. By my delusive power, O king, I will carry off your family priest and, making him just like myself by dint of my penance, will keep him here for the year, while I, O king, will take his form and manage everything for you. The night is far gone, so you had better retire now. On the third day we will meet again. By my penitential power I will convey you home, both you and your horse, even while you are asleep. I'll come in the form I have told you, and you will recognize me when I call you aside and remind you all of this, the king went to sleep in obedience to the hermit, while the counterfeit sage returned to his own seat and sat down there. Deep sleep came upon the weary monarch, but how could the other fellow sleep? Distracted as he was with anxiety, the demon Kalaketu made his appearance there. It was he who had amused the form of a boar and led the king astray. A great friend of the hermit king, he was skilled in manifold ways of deceit. He had 100 sons and 10 brothers, who were great villains, invincible and annoying to the gods. Seeing the Brahmanas, saints and gods in distress, the king had already killed them all in the battle. Recalling the old grudge, the wretch conspired with the hermit king and contrived a plot for the extermination of the enemy, but as fate would have it, the king knew nothing of it. A spirited foe, even though left alone, should not be lightly regarded. The demon Rahu, who has nothing left of him but his head, is able to torment both the sun and moon even to this day. The hermit king was delighted to see his ally and rose to meet him. The meeting gave him much satisfaction, and he related the whole story to his friend. The demon too was glad and said, "Listen, O king, since you have followed my advice, take the enemy as subdued. Cease to worry now and lay yourself to rest. God has effected a cure without the use of a medicine. I will sweep away the enemy root and branch and see you on the 4th day." Fully reassuring the hermit king, the arch impostor, who was highly inscrutable, departed. In an instant he conveyed Pratap Bhanu to his palace, horse and all. Putting the king to bed beside his queen, he tied up the horse in the stall in the proper way. Again, he carried off the king's family priest and, depriving him of his senses by his supernatural power, kept him in a mountain cave. Himself assuming the form of the family priest, the demon went and lay down on the former's sumptuous bed. The king woke up even before daybreak and felt much astonished to find himself at home. Attributing the miracle to the supernatural power of the sage, he got up quietly, unperceived by the queen. Mounting the same horse, he rode off to the woods without any man or woman of the city knowing it. When it was midday, the king returned. There was rejoicing and festal music in every house. When the king saw his family priest, he looked at him in amazement, recollecting the object he held so dear to his heart. The interval of 3 days hung heavy on the monarch as an age, his mind being set on the feet of the false anchorite. At the appointed time the priest came and reminded him in detail of all that had been agreed upon. The king was delighted to recognize his preceptor in the priest's form. His mind was too clouded to have a sense left. At once, he invited 100,000 chosen Brahmanas with their families. The priest cooked 4 kinds of food with 6 different tastes as mentioned in the Vedas. He prepared an illusory banquet and a variety of seasoned dishes more than one could count. Dressing the flesh of a variety of animals, the wretch mixed with it the cooked flesh of Brahmanas. All the invited Brahmanas were then called for the dinner. Their feet were duly washed and they were respectfully shown to their places. The moment the king began to serve the food, a fictitious voice from the heaven, raised by the demon Kalaketu himself, said, "Up, up, Brahmanas, and return to your homes. Taste not this food, it is most harmful. The dishes include the flesh of the Brahmanas." Up rose all the Brahmanas, believing the ethereal voice. The king lost his nerve. His mind was bewildered with infatuation. As fate would have it, he could not utter a word. Then exclaimed the Brahmanas in wrath, regardless of consequences, "O foolish king, go and take birth in the demon's form, you and all your family." O vile Kshatriya, inviting the Brahmanas, you were out to ruin them with their families. But God has preserved our sanctity. It is you and your race that are undone. In the course of a year you shall perish, and not a soul shall be left in your family to offer water to gratify your spirit. Hearing the curse, the king was so stricken with fear. Again a voice was heard from heaven. O holy Brahmanas, you have uttered this curse without careful thought. The king has committed no crime. The Brahmanas were astounded when they heard the ethereal voice. The king hastened to the kitchen. There was neither any food nor the Brahmana cook. The king returned in deep thought. He related the whole story to the Brahmanas and threw himself on the ground, frantic with fear. Even though you are guileless, O king, what is inevitable fails not. A Brahmana's curse is very terrible. No amount of effort can counteract it. So saying, all the Brahmanas dispersed. When the people of the city received the news, they were much perturbed and began to blame Providence, who had begun upon a swan and produced a crow instead. Conveying the priest to his house, the demon Kalaketu communicated the tidings to the hermit. The wretch in his turn dispatched letters in all directions, and a host of princes hastened with their troops martially arrayed and, beating their kettle drums, beleaguered the city. Every day battles were fought in diverse forms. All his champions fought valiantly and fell, and the king with his brother bit the dust. Not one of Satyaketu's family survived. A Brahmana's curse can never fail. Having vanquished the foe and re-inhabiting the city, all the chiefs returned to their own capitals, enriched with victory and fame. Listen, O Bharadwaj, whosoever incurs the displeasure of heaven, for him a grain of dust becomes vast as mountain Meru. A father becomes frightful as Yama, the god of death, and every rope a snake. O sage, in due time, I tell you, this king with his family was born as a demon. He had 10 heads and 20 arms. His name was Rawan. He was a formidable hero. The king's younger brother, Arimardana by name, became the powerful Kumbhakarna. His minister, who was known as Dharmarushi, became Ravan's younger half-brother, Vibhishan by name, who is known to the whole world as a devotee of God Vishnuji and a repository of wisdom. And the king's sons and servants, they were born a fierce demon trio. These wretches could take any shape they liked and belonged to various orders. They were all wicked, monstrous, and devoid of sense, and were ruthless, bloody, and sinful. They were a torment to all creation beyond what words can tell. Even though they were born in the incomparably pure and holy line of sage Pulastya, yet, on account of the Brahmana's curse, they were all embodiments of sin. All the 3 brothers practiced austerities of various kinds, terrible beyond all description. Seeing their penance, the Creator drew nigh and said to the eldest of them, "Ask a boon, dear son." The 10-headed Ravan suppliantly clasped his feet and addressed to him the following words: "Listen, O Lord of the universe, my prayer is that I should die at the hands of none save monkeys and men. So be it. You have done great penance. This was the boon Brahmaji, and I granted to him," said Shivji. The Creator then approached Kumbhakarna and was astonished to see his gigantic form. Brahmaji said to himself, Should this wretch have his daily repast, the whole world will be laid to waste. So Brahmaji directed Shardaji, who changed his mind. Accordingly, the demon asked for continued sleep, extending over 6 months. Last of all, Brahmaji went up to Vibhishan and said, "Ask a boon, my son." He asked for pure love for the lotus feet of Lord. Having granted them boons, Brahmaji went away, while they returned to their home rejoicing. The demon Maya had a daughter, Mandodari by name, who was exceedingly beautiful, a jewel of womankind. Maya brought and made her over to Rawan, knowing that the latter was going to become the lord of the demons. Delighted at having obtained such a good wife, Rawan next went and married his 2 brothers. On a 3-peaked mountain called Trikuta, in the middle of the ocean, there stood a very large fortress built by Brahmaji himself. The demon Maya, who was a great architect, renovated it. It contained numberless palaces of gold and jewels, and was more beautiful and charming than Bhogavati, the city of serpents, and Amravati, the capital of Indra. It was known throughout the world by the name Lanka. The ocean surrounded it on all sides as a very deep moat. It had a strong fortification wall built of gold and jewels, the architectural beauty of which defied description. Whoever was preordained by Sri Hari to be the chief of the demons in a particular cycle, that illustrious hero of incomparable might lived there with his army. Great demon warriors had been living there. They were all exterminated in battle by the gods. Now, under Indra's commission, it was occupied by a garrison consisting of 10 million guards of Kubera, the chief of the Yakshas. Having obtained this news from some quarter, Rawan marshalled his army and besieged the fortress. Seeing his vast force of fierce warriors, the Yakshas fled for their lives. Thereupon, Rawan surveyed the whole city. He was much pleased with what he saw, and all his anxiety was gone. Perceiving that the city was naturally beautiful and inaccessible for others, Rawan fixed his capital there. By assigning quarters to his followers according to their several deserts, he made them all happy. On one occasion, he led an expedition against Kubera and carried away his aerial car, known by the name of Pushpaka, as trophy. Again, in a sportive mood, he went and lifted Mount Kailas, and thereby testing, as it were, the might of his arms, returned most jubilant. His happiness and prosperity, the number of his sons, his army and his allies, his victories and glory, his might, wisdom and fame grew from more to more every day, even as avarice grows with each new grain. He had a stalwart brother like Kumbhakarna, a rival to whom was never born in this world. Drinking his fill, he remained buried in sleep for 6 months, and at his waking the 3 worlds trembled. Were he to take his meals every day, the whole universe would soon have been ruined. He was unspeakably staunch in fight, and these were numberless brave warriors who could be compared with him. Ravan's eldest son was Meghanand, who ranked foremost among the champions of the world. Before him, none could stand in battle. Due to him, there was a stampede in the city of immortals every day. There were many more champions, such as the hideous Kumukha, the interpret Akampana, Kulsi Sharda with teeth like thunderbolts, the fiery Dhumketu, and the gigantic Atikaya, each one of whom was able to subdue the whole world. Taking form at will, They were skilled in all forms of demoniac Maya. They never thought of piety or compassion, even in dream. One day the 10-headed Rawan was seated in court and reviewed his innumerable retainers, hosts of sons and grandsons, relatives and servants, troops of demons more than anyone could count. On seeing the host, the naturally proud Ravan spoke words full of wrath and arrogance. Listen, all demon troops, the host of heaven are my enemies. They never dare to stand up in open fight, but flee away at the sight of a powerful adversary. There is only one way of causing their death, which I tell you in detail. Now listen to it. Go and prevent the feasting of Brahmanas, the performance of sacrifices, the pouring of oblations into the sacred fire, the ceremony of Shraddha, offering food, etc. to a departed soul, and all other religious functions. Emaciated with the starvation and rendered weak, the gods will automatically surrender to me. Then I will see whether I should kill them or let them go after subjecting them perfectly to my will. Then Ravan sent for Meghanand and admonished him, inciting him to greater strength and hostility. The gods who are staunch in battle, powerful and proud of their fighting skill, you should conquer in battle and bring them in chains. The son got up and bowed to the commands of his father. In this way, Ravan ordered all and himself sailed forth, club in hand. Even as the 10-headed Ravan marched, the earth shook, and at his thundering call, the spouses of gods miscarried. Hearing of Ravan's angry approach, the gods themselves sought the caves of Mount Sumeru. When the 10-faced Ravan invaded the beautiful realms of the guardians of 10 quarters, he found them all desolate. Again and again, he roared loudly like a lion and challenging the gods to battle, scoffed at them. Mad with lust of blood, he traversed the whole world in search of a combatant. But nowhere could he find anyone. The sun god, the moon god, the wind god, the god of water, the gods of wealth and fire, the gods of time and death, and all other gods entrusted with the governance of the world, Kinnaras, Sidhaas, men, gods and Nagas, all were willfully harassed by him. All embodied beings in creation of Brahmaji, whether men or women, submitted to Ravan's will. All did his bidding out of fear and always bowed suppliantly at his feet. By his mighty arm he subdued the whole universe and left no one independent. The king of kings, Ravan, ruled according to his own will. He won by the might of his arms and wedded daughters of gods, Yakshas, Gandharvas, human beings, Kinnaras and Nagas, and many other beautiful and excellent dames. Whatever Ravan told Indrajit to do was done by him sooner, as it were, than the former uttered the command. Now hear what they did who had been ordered by him even earlier. The whole demon crew, sinful at heart and of terrible aspect, were the torment of heaven. Roaming at night, they did outrages of various kinds and assumed diverse forms through their delusive power. They acted in every contrary to Veda and did everything in their power to eradicate religion. Whatever they found, a cow or a Brahmana, they set fire to that city, town or village. Virtuous acts were nowhere to be seen. No one paid any respect to the gods, the Brahmanas, and the spiritual preceptor. There was no devotion to Sri Hari, no sacrificial performances, no austerities, and no spiritual wisdom. No one would ever dream of listening to the Vedas or the Puranas. If ever any talk of jap, muttering of sacred formulas, yoga, dispassion, penance, or of oblations to gods in sacrifice entered Ravan's ears, he would at once be on his feet and run to stop them. He would allow nothing to these and would destroy everything he laid his hands upon. There was such corruption in the world that no talk of piety could be heard anywhere. Whoever recited the Vedas or the Puranas was intimidated in manifold ways and sent into exile. The terrible outrages the demons did beckon description. There is no limit to the evil doings of those who hold violence most dear to their heart. The number of villains, thieves and gamblers, and those who coveted others' wealth and wives swelled to a great extent. People honored not their parents and gods and exacted services from pious souls. Those who act in this way, Bhavaniji, know all such creatures are demons. Perceiving the supreme disrespect for religion, earth was extremely alarmed and perturbed. The weight of mountains, rivers and oceans, she said to herself, is not so oppressive to me as of him who is malevolent to others. She saw all goodness perverted, yet for fear of Ravan she could not utter a word. After great deliberation, she took the form of a cow and went to the spot where all gods and sages were in hiding. With tears in her eyes, she told them her sufferings, but none of them could be of any help to her. The gods, sages and Gandharvas, celestial songsters, all repaired to Brahmaji's abode. With them was poor earth in the form of a cow, grievously stricken with fear and grief. Brahmaji came to know everything, and realizing in his heart his inability to help her, he said, "The immortal Lord, whose servant you are, will be my help, as well as yours." "Have patience, earth," said Brahmaji, "and fix your mind on the feet of Shri Hari. The Lord knows the distress of his servants and will put an end to your terrible suffering." All the gods sat in council. "Where can we find the Lord, so that we may appeal to him?" Someone suggested that they should go to Vaikuntha. Another said, "The Lord has his abode in the ocean of milk." The Lord always manifests himself in response to the devotion and love one cherishes in one's heart. "Girija, I too happened to be in that assembly and took occasion to put in a word. For aught I know, Shri Hari is present everywhere, alike, and is revealed only by love. Tell me any place, time or quarter of the heaven where the Lord is not. Having taken the form of all creation, both animate and inanimate, he is yet destitute of everything and passionless. He is revealed by love, even as fire is manifested by friction. My words found favor with all, and Brahmaji applauded me, saying, 'Well said, well said.' Brahmaji was glad at heart to hear my words. The hair on his body bristled and tears flowed from his eyes. Recovering himself, the stable-minded Brahmaji joined his palms and prayed. Glory, all glory to you, O Lord of immortals, O delight of the devotees, O protector of the suppliant, O benefactor of cows and the Brahmanas, O slayer of demons, O beloved consort of Lakshmiji, daughter of the ocean, glory to you, O guardian of gods and the earth. Mysterious are thy ways, their secret is known to none. Let him who is benevolent by nature and compassionate to the humble show his grace. Glory, all glory to the immortal Lord Mukunda, the bestower of salvation and love, who resides in all hearts, is supreme bliss personified, who is omnipresent, unknowable, and supersensuous, whose acts are holy, and who is beyond the veil of Maya, illusion. Glory to Him who is truth, consciousness, and bliss combined, who is most lovingly meditated upon day and night, and whose praises are sung by multitudes of sages, who are full of dispassion and entirely free from infatuation. Let the slayer of the sinful Agha bestow his care on us, he who brought forth the threefold creation, that which is dominated by Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, that is, gods, men, and demons. Without anyone else to assist him, we know neither devotion nor worship. He who disperses the fear of transmigration delights the mind of sages and puts an end to host of calamities. We gods betake ourselves to Him in thought, word, and deed, giving up our wonted cleverness. The Lord, who is known neither to Shardaji, the goddess of learning, nor to Vedas, nor again to Sesha, the serpent god, nor to any of the sages, who, as the Vedas proclaim, loves the lowly, let him be moved by pity. The sages, Sidhaas, a class of celestials naturally endowed with the supernatural powers, and all gods, grievously stricken with fear, bow at the lotus feet of the Lord, who serves as Mount Mandara, for churning the ocean of worldly existence, who is charming in every way, who is an abode of virtues and an embodiment of bliss. Knowing that the God and earth were terror-stricken and hearing their loving entreaties, a deep voice came from the heaven, which moved all their doubt and anxiety. Fear not, O sages, Sidhaas, and Indra, the chief of gods. For your sake, I will assume the form of a human being. In the glorious solar race, I shall be born as a human being along with my part manifestations. The sage Kashyapa and his wife Aditi did severe penance. To them I have already vouchsafed a boon. They have appeared in the city of Ayodhya as rulers of men in the form of Dashrath and Kaushalya. In their house I shall take birth in the form of 4 brothers, the ornament of Raghu's line. I shall justify all that was uttered by Naradji and shall descend with my supreme energy. In this way I shall relieve the earth of all its burden. Be fearless, O gods. As the divine voice from heaven reached the gods' ears, they returned forthwith with their heart soothed. Then Brahmaji admonished earth, who was rid of all fear and felt reassured in her heart. Then Brahmaji proceeded to his realm. After thus instructing the gods, assuming the form of monkeys, you go to the earth and adore the feet of Sri Hari. All the gods went to their several abodes along with earth. They all felt relieved in their heart, and the gods were delighted to receive the orders that Brahmaji gave, and lost no time in carrying them out. They took the form of monkeys on earth. Their might and glory were incomparable. They were all brave and had mountains, trees, nails for their weapons. Resolute of mind, they awaited the advent of Sri Hari, swarming on the mountains and in woods wherever they liked, and dividing themselves into gallant troops of their own. I have related to you all this interesting account. Now hear that which was interrupted before. In the city of Ayodhya there ruled a king who was a jewel of Raghu's race. He was called Dashrath, a name which is familiar in the Vedas. He was a champion of virtue a repository of good qualities and a man of wisdom. He was a sincere devotee of God Vishnuji, and his mind was also set on him. Kaushalya and his other beloved consorts were all the holy life, humble and devoted to their Lord. They had a strong attachment to the lotus feet of Sri Hari. One day the king was sad at heart that he had no son. He hastened to his preceptor's residence and, falling at the feet, made many entreaties. He told the Guru all his joys and sorrows. The sage Vasishtha comforted him in many ways and said, "Take heart and wait. You will have 4 sons, who will be known throughout the 3 worlds and will rid of the devotees of their fears." Then Vasishtha summoned the sage Sirinji and had a noble sacrifice performed by him for the birth of a son to the king. When the sage devoutly offered oblations into the sacred fire, the fire god appeared with an offering of rice boiled with milk in his hand. Said the fire god, "Whatever Vasishtha has contemplated for you, that object is fully accomplished. Take this oblation, O king, and divide it in such proportions as you think fit." The fire god then disappeared after telling the whole assembly of what was to be done. The king was transported with ecstasy and could not contain himself for joy. The king at once sent for his beloved consorts. When Kaushalya and the other queens arrived there, he gave 1/2 of the offering to Kaushalya and divided the other into 2 halves, one of which he gave to Kaikeyi. The remaining was again divided into 2 parts, which he placed in the hands of Kaushalya and Kaikeyi, and after thus obtaining their approval, handed both the shares to Sumitra. In this way, all the queens became pregnant. They were all glad of heart and felt very happy. From the time Sri Hari found his way into the womb of joy, and prosperity reigned in all the worlds. In the palace shone the queens, who were all minds of beauty, virtue, and glory. Some time was thus happily spent, till the time arrived for the Lord to be revealed. The position of the sun and the moon, the zodiacal sign into which the sun had entered, the position of the 7 other planets, the day of the week, as well as the day of the lunar month, all these turned out to be propitious. And full of delight was all creation, animate and inanimate, for the birth of Shri Ramji is the source of joy. It was the 9th day of the bright half of the sacred month of Chaitra. The moon had entered the asterism named Abhijit, which is so dear to Sri Hari. The sun was at its meridian. The day was neither cold nor hot. It was a holy time which gave rest to the whole world. A cool, soft, and fragrant breeze was blowing. The gods were feeling exhilarated, and the saints were bubbling with enthusiasm. The woods were full of blossoms, the mountains were resplendent with gems, and every river flowed a stream of nectar. When Brahmaji perceived that the time of Sri Ramji's birth had approached, all the gods came out with their aerial cars duly equipped. The bright heaven was crowded with their hosts, and troops of Gandharvas chanted praises and rained down flowers, placing them in their beautiful palms. The sky resounded with the beat of kettle drums. Nagas, sages, and gods offered praises and tendered their services in manifold ways. Having offered their praises, the gods returned to their several abodes, when the Lord and abode of the universe and the solace of all creation manifested himself. The gracious Lord, who is compassionate to the lowly and the benefactor of Kaushalya, appeared. The thought of his marvelous form, which stole the heart of sages, filled the mother with joy. His body was dark as a cloud and delight of all eyes. In his forearms he bore his characteristic emblems: a conch shell, a discus, a club, and a lotus. Adorned with jewels and garland of sylvan flowers and endowed with large eyes, the slayer of the demon Khara was an ocean of beauty. Joining both her palms, the mother said, "O infinite Lord, now can I praise you. The Vedas as well as the Puranas declare you as transcending Maya, beyond attributes, above knowledge and beyond all measure. He who is sung by the Vedas and holy men as an ocean of mercy and bliss and the repository of all virtues. The same Lord of Lakshmiji, the lover of his devotees, has revealed himself for my good. The Vedas proclaim that every pore of your body contains multitudes of universes brought forth by Maya. That such a Lord stayed in my womb, this amusing story staggers the mind of even men of wisdom. When the revelation came upon the mother, the Lord smiled. He would perform many a sportive act. Therefore, he exhorted her by telling her the charming account of her previous birth, so that she might love him as her own child. The mother's mind was changed. She spoke again. Give up this superhuman form and indulge in childish sports, which are so dear to a mother's heart. The joy that comes from such sports is unequaled in every way. Hearing these words, the all-wise Lord of Immortals became an infant and began to cry. Those who sing this lay, says Tulsidas ji, attain to the abode of Sri Hari and never fall into the well of mundane existence. For the sake of Brahmanas, cows, gods, and saints, the Lord, who transcends Maya and is beyond the three modes of Prakriti, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, as well as beyond the reach of the senses, took birth as a man assuming a form which is a product of his own will. On hearing the most pleasing sound of the baby's cries, all the queens came in a flurry. Maid-servants ran helter-skelter in great delight. All the people of the city were transported with joy. When the tidings of the birth of a son reached Dashratha's ears, he was drowned, as it were, in the ecstasy of absorption into Brahmaji. With a mind saturated with the highest love and with a body thrilling all over with joy, he sought to rise while attempting to recover his senses. The same Lord, whose very name brings blessings with it, even when it reaches one's ears, has arrived at my house. He said to himself, and the thought filled his mind with supreme joy. Sending for musicians, he said, "Play on your instruments." The preceptor Vasishtaji was also summoned, and he called at the palace door with a train of Brahmanas. They all went and gazed upon the peerless babe, who was an embodiment of beauty and possessed excellences more than one could tell. After performing the Nandimukha Shraddha, the king completed all the rites connected with the birth of a child and made gifts of gold, cows, raiment and jewels to the Brahmanas. The city was full of flags and banners and festive archers. It was decorated in a way which defies description. Showers of flowers dropped from the heaven. Everybody was wrapped in the joy of absorption into Brahmaji. Women streamed forth in troops. They came running in their natural toilet, carrying jars of gold and salvers full of auspicious articles. They entered the portals of the royal palace, singing as they went along, waving lights and passing offerings round and round over the child's head. As an act of exorcism, they threw themselves at the babe's feet again and again. Bards, minstrels, panegyrists, and songsters chanted solemn praises of the Lord of Raghus. Everyone gave whatever one possessed. Even he who received it did not retain it. All the lanes of the city were muddy with the pastes of musk, sandal, and saffron. There was happy music of festivity in every house, for the very fountain of beauty and manifested himself. All the men and women of the city were full of joy everywhere. Kaikeyi and Sumitra each gave birth to a lovely boy. The joy, grandeur, solemnity of the occasion and the concourse of men were more than what Shardaji and the Serpent King could describe. The city of Ayodhya wore a gala appearance. It looked as if night had come to see the Lord, and feeling abashed as it were at the sight of the sun, her own Lord had deliberately stayed over in the form of twilight. Clouds of incense represented the dusk, and the handfuls of red powder tossed up and wafted in the air represented the reddish light of sunset. The host of jewels that gleamed on the housetops looked like so many stars, while the round pinnacle on the top of the royal palace corresponded to the beautiful moon. The murmuring sound of the chanting of the Veda in the palace resembled the chirping of birds appropriate to the occasion. Gazing upon this spectacle, the sun forgot himself. A whole month passed without his knowing it. The day assumed the length of a month, but no one could understand the mystery. The sun stood motionless with his chariot. How could there be any night? Nobody noticed this strange phenomenon. The sun at last moved ahead, singing the praises of Shri Ramji as he went. Witnessing the great festival, the gods, sages and the Nagas proceeded to their several abodes, congratulating themselves on their good luck. I tell you one more covert act of mine. Listen to it, O Girija, for I know your steadfast faith. The sage Kakabhusandhi and myself both were there together in human form without anyone knowing it. Elated with supreme joy and the delight of love, we roamed about the streets in ecstasy, forgetting ourselves. He alone who enjoyed Shri Ramji's grace could be appraised of this blessed adventure of ours. On that occasion, the king granted the desire of everyone's heart in whatever manner one came. He bestowed elephants, chariots, horses, gold, cows, diamonds and costumes of various kinds. All were satisfied in their heart and invoked blessings here and there, saying, "May all the sons of Dashrath live long, those Lord of Tulsidas ji." A few days rolled on in this way. Days and nights passed unnoticed. Knowing that the time had come for naming the children, the king sent for the enlightened sage Vasishtha ji. After paying him homage, the king spoke to him thus, "Holy sir, kindly assign them names that you have fixed your mind upon. Their names are many and unique, yet, O king, I will declare them according to my own lights. This eldest boy of yours, who is an ocean of felicity and embodiment of joy, a particle of which fills the three worlds with delight, has for his name Rama, the very home of bliss and the comforter of all the worlds. Your second son, who sustains and supports the universe, will be called Bharata, while he whose very thought destroys one's enemies is celebrated in the Vedas by the name of Shatrughan. He who is the abode of noble characteristics, the beloved Shri Ramji's and the mainstay of the whole universe, was given by Guru Vasishtha Ji the splendid name of Lakshmana. The preceptor assigned these names after careful thought and then said, "Your 4 sons, O king, are the essence of Veda itself. Of them, Shri Ramji is the sage's treasure, the devotee's all in all, and Shivji's very life. He takes delight in present in the rapture of childish spots. From his earliest days, Lakshmana came to look upon Shri Ramji as his benefactor and master and conceived devotion to his fate. The love that existed between the 2 half-brothers, Bharata and Shatrughan, was as glorious as that which obtains between a master and his servant. As the mothers gazed on the beauty of the 2 lovely pairs, one of whom was dark, the other fair, they would break a blade of grass in order to avert the evil eye. Although all the 4 brothers were embodiments of amiability, beauty and goodness, yet Shri Ramji was an ocean of bliss par excellence. In his heart shone the moon of grace, and his captivating smile represented its rays. Now on her lap, and now in the beautiful cradle, the mother fondled him, calling him her own darling. The unborn and all-pervading Brahmaji, who is untainted by Maya, without attributes and devoid of play, has sought shelter in the arms of Kaushalya, conquered by her love and devotion. His dark form, which resembles a blue lotus and a heavy rain cloud, possessed the beauty of millions of cupids. The nails glistened on his red lotus-like feet as if pearls had been set on the petals of the rosy lotus. Marks of a thunderbolt, a flag and a goad shone on his soles, and the tinkling of his anklets enraptured the hearts of sages. A string of tiny bells girdled his waist, and there were 3 folds in his belly. The depth of his navel is known to him alone who has perceived it. His long arms were adorned with a number of ornaments, and the tiger's claw hanging on his breast possessed an exquisite beauty. The elegance of the necklace of gems with a diamond at the lowest end and the print of the Brahmana's foot fascinated one's mind. His neck resembled a conch shell in its spiral shape, and the chin looked most beautiful, while his face flushed with the beauty of countless cupids. Pairs of small teeth were veiled by rosy lips, and his beautiful nose and the sectarian mark on his brow defied description. With charming ears and most lovely cheeks, his sweet lisping prattle was most delightful to hear. The smooth and curly hair that had never been trimmed since his very birth had been beautifully dressed in manifold ways by the mother. A yellow frock covered his body, and his crawling on knees and hands was most pleasing to me. The elegance of his form was something which even the Vedas and Sesha, the serpent god, could not describe. It is known to him alone who has beheld it even in a dream. The all-blissful Lord, who is above delusion and transcends knowledge, speech, and all sensuous perception, sported like an innocent child, yielding to the supreme love of the royal couple, Dashrath and Kaushalya. In this way, Shri Ramji, the father and mother of the universe, delighted the people of Ayodhya. Bhavani ji, this demonstrates how those who have conceived devotion to the feet of Lord of Raghus and repaid by him. On the other hand, no one can liberate from the bondage of worldly existence him who is averse to the Lord of Raghus. However much he may struggle, even that Maya, which has held under the sway of all living beings, both animate and inanimate, trembles before the Lord, who makes her dance to the play of his eyebrows. Leaving such a Lord, tell me, whom should we adore? The Lord of the Raghus will be compassionate to those who betake themselves to him in thought, word, and deed, giving up all cleverness. In this way, the Lord, spotted as a child, to the delight of all the people of the city, the mother would now dandle him in her arms, and now put him down and rock him in the cradle. Kaushalya remained so wrapped in love that days and nights passed unnoticed. Out of affection for her boy, she would sing lays of his childlike. One day, Mother Kaushalya washed and adorned her boy and put him to sleep in the cradle. Therefore, she bathed himself in order to worship the patron deity of her family. Having worshipped the deity, she offered him food and then returned to the kitchen. When she came back to the place of worship, she beheld her boy eating the food that had been offered to the Lord. Frightened at this, the mother went to her boy and found him asleep in the nursery. Coming back once more to the temple, she still saw the boy there. She now trembled with fear, and her mind found no rest. She saw two boys, one in the temple and the other in the nursery. She said to herself, "Is it my mental illusion or some other unusual phenomenon?" When Shri Ramji saw his mother perplexed, the Lord gently smiled. The Lord then revealed to his mother his marvelous infinite form, every pore of whose skin contained millions of universes. She saw therein countless suns and moons, Shivjis and four-faced Brahmajis, and a number of mountains, rivers, oceans, plains and woods, as well as the spirit of time, the principle of action, the modes of Prakriti, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, the spirit of knowledge and nature, and many more things of which she had never heard before. She further perceived Maya, who is powerful in every respect, stricken with terror and standing with her palms joined together. The mother also beheld the embodied soul who is made to dance by Maya, and even so the spirit of devotion which liberates the soul. The hair on the mother's body bristled, and she stood speechless. Closing her eyes, she bowed her head at the Lord's feet. Seeing the mother struck with the wonder, the slayer of Khara assumed the form of a child again. She was unable to utter praises and trembled at the thought that she had looked upon the Father of the universe as her own child. Sri Hari comforted his mother in many ways and said, "Listen, my mother, do not reveal this fact to anyone." Joining her palms, Kaushalya prayed again and again, "See, my Lord, that your Maya no longer casts a spell on me." Sri Hari indulged in many kinds of childish sports to the great delight of his servants. After some time, all the four brothers passed the stage of infancy, gladdening the inmates of the house. The preceptor then came and performed the ceremony of tonsure, and the Brahmanas received handsome presents for officiating at the same. All the four noble princes moved about indulging in numerous plays, which were most delightful to look at. The Lord, who cannot be comprehended through mind, speech or action, spotted in the courtyard of Dashrath. When the king, while at dinner, called him, he would not turn up, loth as he was to leave the company of his playmates. When Kaushalya went to call him, the Lord would run away toddling. He whom the Vedas declare in negative terms and whose end even Shivji could not find, the mother ran to catch him by force. With his body besmirched all over with dust, he came and the king smilingly took him in his arms. Even while the Lord sat at dinner, his mind was restless, so that the moment he got a chance, he would run away hither and thither with a scream of delight, his mouth daubed with curds and rice. His charming and most innocent childish sports have been sung by Sharadaji, Shesha, Shambhuji and the Vedas. Those whose mind does not take delight in these have been deprived by providence of a great good fortune. When all the four brothers attained of boyhood, the preceptor, as well as their parents, invested them with the sacred thread. The Lord of Raghus then proceeded to his preceptor's residence for study and in a short time mastered all the branches of knowledge. What a great fun that Sri Hari, whose natural breath stands crystallized in the form of the four Vedas, should go to school. Proficient in learning and perfect in politeness, virtues and decorum, they played all the games, imitating the role of a king. With an arrow and bow in the hands of each they appeared, most charming. Their beauty enraptured the whole creation, both animate and inanimate. Through whichever street the four brothers passed in pursuit of their sport, all the men and women there stood motionless on perceiving them. The people of Ayodhya, men and women, elderly men as well as children, all held the gracious Ramji dearer than life. Calling his half-brothers and playmates, Shri Ramji would take them with him and go out to the forest for hunting every day. He would deliberately kill only holy game and brought and showed the daily back to the king. The beasts that were killed by Shri Ramji's shaft went straight to heaven after death. He took his meals with his younger brothers and companions and obeyed the orders of his parents. He would always contrive means to delight the people of the city. He would listen to the Vedas and Puranas with rapt attention and would himself expound the truths contained therein to his younger brothers. Rising at break of day, the Lord of Raghus would bow his head to his parents and preceptor, and obtaining their permission, busied himself with the affairs of the city. The king was glad at heart to see his noble acts. The Lord, who is all-pervading, indivisible, desireless, unbegotten, attributeless, and without name or form, performed marvelous acts of various kinds for the sake of his devotees. All this story has been sung by me. Now hear attentively what followed. The great enlightened hermit Vishwamitraji lived in a forest, knowing it to be a sacred spot. There he practiced jap, muttering of the sacred formulas, and yoga, and performed sacrifices, but he was much afraid of the demons Maricha and Subahu. For as soon as they saw a sacrifice, they would hasten to desecrate it to the great charging of the sage, who felt disturbed in his mind and thought that the wicked Rakshasas could not be disposed of without Sri Hari. The great sage then said to himself, "The Lord has already taken birth in order to relieve the earth of its burden. Let me make the outrage of the demons an excuse of seeing his feet, and after due entreaty bring the two brothers here. I will regale my eyes with the sight of him who is the abode of knowledge, dispassion, and all virtues." Indulging in expectation of various kinds, the sage took no time in reaching his destination. Bathing in the stream of the Sarayu, he proceeded to the royal court. When the king heard of the sage's visit, he went out to meet him with a party of Brahmanas. Prostrating himself on the ground, the king reverently brought him in and seated him on his own throne. Then washing the sage's feet, he paid him great honors and said, "No one else is so blessed as I am today." The king next entertained him with various kinds of food, and the great sage was much delighted at heart. He then placed his 4 sons on the father's feet. At the sight of Shri Ramji, the sage forgot all about himself. He was enraptured as he gazed on the beauty of Shri Ramji's countenance, even as the Kekora bird is enamored of the full moon. Gladdened at heart, the king then addressed the following words to him. "Reverend sir, you have never shown such grace to me before. Tell me what brings you here. I will carry out your order without delay. Hosts of demons molest me, O king. I have therefore come to ask something of you. Let me have the Lord of Raghus, Shri Ramji, with his younger brother Lakshmana. With the extermination of the demons I will feel secure. Entrust them to me, O king, with a cheerful heart. Let no infatuation or ignorance stand in your way. You will earn religious merit and fair renown thereby, and your sons will be highly blessed." Hearing this most unwelcome demand, the king's heart quivered and the brightness of his countenance faded. He said, "I have been blessed with these 4 sons in my old age. You have therefore made your demand without due consideration, holy sir. Ask of me land, cattle, goods and treasure. I will gladly give all I have without delay. Nothing is dearer than one's body and life. Even these I would part without a second. All my sons are dear to me as life, but in no case can I afford to spare Ramji, my lord. My lovely boys, who are yet too young, are no match for the most hideous and relentless demons." The enlightened hermit Vishwamitraji felt delighted at heart to hear the king's reply, steeped as it was in the nectar of love. Then Vasishthaji pleaded with the king in manifold ways, and all his doubts were gone. Most politely he sent for the 2 boys, and pressing them to his bosom, admonished them in many ways. Turning to the sage, he then said, "My lord, the 2 boys are my very life. You are their only father now, holy sir. There is no one to look after them." Invoking various blessings on the boys, the king committed them to the care of the sage. Then they called at the mother's apartment, and bowing their head at the feet, departed. The 2 heroes, lions amongst men, oceans of compassion, resolute of purpose, and the ultimate cause of the whole universe, gladly proceeded to rid the sage of his fear. The Lord had reddish eyes, a broad chest and long arms. His body was dark as the blue lotus or the tamala tree. With a beautiful quiver fastened at his back with a yellow piece of cloth wrapped round his waist, he held in his 2 hands a lovely bow and arrow respectively. In the 2 pretty boys, one of whom was dark and the other fair, Vishwamitraji secured a great treasure. "I have now realized," said he to himself, "that the Lord is a votary of Brahmanas, and on my account he has left his own father." While on the way the sage pointed out the demoness Tadaka, who on hearing their voice rushed up in a fury. With a single shaft the Lord took her life, and recognizing her as deserving of compassion, bestowed his own state on her. Then the seer Vishwamitraji, while recognizing his Lord as the fountain of knowledge, imparted to him a sacred formula which armed him against hunger and thirst, and endowed him with unequaled strength of body and a glow of vigor. Making over to him every kind of weapon, the sage took the Lord to his own hermitage and devotedly gave him bulbs, roots, and fruits to eat, perceiving in him his greatest friend. At daybreak, the Lord of Raghus said to the sage, "You may now go and perform your sacrifice without any fear of molestation." All the sages then started offering oblations into the sacred fire, while Shri Ramji himself guarded the sacrifice. On hearing of it, the furious demon Maricha, a great enemy of hermits, rushed with his army. Shri Ramji struck him with a headless shaft, and he felt at the distance of 800 miles beyond the seashore. The Lord next dispatched Subahu with an arrow of fire, while his younger brother Lakshmana exterminated the demon host. Having killed the demons in this way, the Lord rid the Brahmanas of their fear. The whole company of the gods and sages offered praises to him. The Lord of Raghus stayed there a few days more and showed his grace to the Brahmanas. Even though the Lord knew everything, the Brahmanas, out of their devotion, repeated to him many legends from the Puranas. The sage then politely said to him in a pleading tone, "My lord, let us go and witness a performance." Hearing of a bow sacrifice, the Lord of Raghus gladly accompanied the noble sage. On the way, they saw a hermitage without bird, beast, or any other living creature. Observing a slab of stone lying there, the Lord inquired of the sage about it, and the latter in reply told to him in detail the whole history behind it. Gautama's consort, having assumed the form of a stone under a curse, seeks with patience the dust of your lotus feet. Show mercy to her, O hero of Raghu's race. At the very touch of his holy feet, which drive away sorrow, emerged Ahilya, a true embodiment of austerity. Beholding the Lord of Raghus, the delight of his servants, she stood before him with joined palms. Her heart being overwhelmed with love, the hair on her body stood on their end, and she was unable to utter a word. The most blessed Ahilya cleaved to his feet, and tears streamed from both eyes. Recovering herself, she recognized the Lord, and by the grace of Shri Ramji attained devotion to his feet. In a guileless speech, she began to praise the Lord. Glory to the Lord of Raghus, who is accessible through spiritual knowledge. I am an impure woman, while the Lord is able to sanctify the whole world and is the delight of his servants. O lotus-eyed enemy of Rawan, you rid your devotees of the fear of rebirth. Therefore, I have taken refuge in you. Pray, save me, save me. My consort, Gautamji, did well in pronouncing a curse on me, and I have deemed it greatest favor. I have feasted my eyes on Shri Hari, yourself, who liberates from the bondage of worldly existence. Lord Shankarji deems your sight as the only blessing worth the name. Lord, I am very innocent of heart. I have only one request to make. I seek no other boon from you, my master. I only crave that my mind may ever continue to enjoy the love of your feet dust, even as a bee sucks the honey from a lotus. The merciful Lord Shri Hari placed on my head the same lotus feet from which issued the most holy Ganga, the heavenly river, which is borne by Shivji on his head, and which are adored by Brahmaji, the Creator. Having thus praised Shri Hari and falling again and again at his feet, Gautamji's consort Ahilya took leave of the Lord, and securing a boon which she held most dear to her heart, she went to her husband's abode full of joy. The Lord Shri Hari is such a great friend of the humble and compassionate beyond one's deserts. Abhor him, O foolish Tulsidas ji, giving up all deceit and willy wrangling. Shri Ramji and Lakshman accompanied the sage and reached the bank of the Ganga, the stream of which purifies the whole universe. The son of Gadhi, Vishwamitraji, related the whole legend how the celestial stream had come down upon earth. The Lord then performed his ablutions with all the sages, and the Brahmanas received gifts of various kinds. Accompanied by a troop of hermits, the Lord gladly proceeded further and quickly drew near to the capital of the Videhas, Mithila. When Shri Ramji beheld the beauty of the city, he, as well as his younger brother, were much delighted. There were many big and small wells, rivers and tanks with water as sweet as nectar and reached by flights of steps made of jewels. Bees, drunk with honey, made a sweet humming sound, and birds of various hues softly cooed. Lotuses of different colors opened their petals, while a cool, soft and fragrant breeze ever delighted the soul. The city was adorned on all sides with flower gardens, orchards and groves, the haunt of innumerable birds full of blossoms, fruits and charming leaves. The beauty of the city surpassed description. Every inch of it was soul captivating. There was a lovely bazaar and gorgeous balconies made of jewels, fashioned as it were by the Creator with his own hands. Wealthy and good merchants who vied with Kubera, the god of wealth, sat with all their various goods. Beautiful crossings of roads and charming streets were constantly sprinkled with the scented waters. The houses of all were abodes of bliss and contained beautiful wall paintings portrayed, as it were, by Rati's lord Cupid himself. The people of the city, both men and women, were good-looking, pious, saintly, virtuous, wise, and accomplished. The palace of King Janaka was most marvelous, the sight of whose splendor astounded even gods. Even the fortification wall filled the mind with wonder. It seemed as if it had enclosed within its limits the beauty of the whole universe. While the palaces were screened here and there by bejeweled gold tapestries of various beautiful designs, while the exquisite palace where Sitaji lived was far too lovely for words to describe. The entrances to the palace were all beautiful and protected with doors of diamond. They were always thronged with feudatory princes, dancers, penigrees and bards. There were spacious stables and stalls for elephants, which were crowded at all times with steeds, elephants and chariots. The king had a number of brave ministers and generals. They all owned mansions that vied with the royal palace. In the outskirts of the city, by the side of the lakes and rivers, numerous princes had encamped here and there. On seeing a fine mango grove, which was comfortable and agreeable in every way, the sage Kaushika, Vishwamitraji said, "O wise hero of Raghu's race, I like this orchard. Let us stay here." "Very well, my lord," answered the gracious lord, and encamped there with all the hermit's train. When the king of Mithila got the news that the great sage Vishwamitraji had come, he took with him his faithful ministers, a number of warriors, noble Brahmanas, his family preceptor Satnanda, and the chief of his kinsmen, and thus went forth rejoicing to meet the prince of sages. Placing his head on the sage's feet, the king made obeisance to him, while the lord of the sages, Vishwamitraji, gladly gave him his blessing. The king then respectfully saluted the Brahmanas and congratulated himself on his good fortune in being able to receive them. Inquiring again and again about his welfare, Vishwamitraji led the king to a seat. At that very time arrived the two brothers who had gone to see the garden. One dark and the other fair, the two lads were yet tender of age. The delight of all eyes, they stole the heart of the whole world. All those present there rose when the Lord of Raghus came, and Vishwamitraji seated him by his side. They were all delighted to see the two brothers. Tears rushed to their eyes, and the hair on their body bristled with joy. Beholding Shri Ramji's lovely and charming form, King Videha, Janaka, was particularly beside himself with joy. Finding his heart overwhelmed with love, the king recovered himself by recourse to reason and, bowing his head at the sage's feet, spoke the following pregnant words in a voice choked with emotion. Tell me, my lord, are these two pretty boys the ornament of a sage's family, or the bulwarks of some royal dynasty? Or is it that Brahmaji, the Absolute, whom the Vedas describe in negative terms, such as not that Neti, has appeared in a dual form? My mind, which is dispassion itself in its natural form, is enraptured at their sight, even as the Kakora bird is transported with joy at the sight of the moon. Therefore, sir, I earnestly inquire of you, tell me the truth, my lord, hide nothing from me. Deeply attached to them at their very sight, my mind has perforce renounced the joy of the absorption into Brahmaji. The sage smilingly answered, You have spoken well, O king. Your words can never be untrue. Whatever living being there are in this world, they all love these boys. Shri Ramji smiled within himself on hearing these words. They are the sons of King Dashrath ji, the jewel of Raghu's race. The king has sent them for my cause. These two noble brothers, Ramji and Lakshman, are the embodiments of beauty, virtue and strength. The whole world knows that they conquered the demons in battle and protected my sacrifice from harm. When I behold my feet, O sage, added the king, I cannot tell what a great merit I have earned in the past. These two brothers, one of whom is dark of hue and the other fair, are the delight of delight itself. Their guileless affection for each other is beyond description. It is so agreeable and soul-ravishing. Listen to me, my lord, continued King Videha, rejoicing. They have natural affinity for each other, like the one existing between Brahmaji, the Supreme Spirit, and the Jiva, the individual soul. The king gazed upon the lord over and over again. The hair on his body stood on end, and his heart overflowed with joy. Extolling the sage and bowing his head at the latter's feet, the king escorted him to his capital and lodged the sage in a beautiful palace which was comfortable at all times. Then, after further homage and rendering all kinds of service to him, the king took leave of the sage and returned to his own palace. Having dined with the seers and rested a while, Lord Shri Ramji, the jewel of Raghu's race, sat down by his brother's side. A quarter of the day still remained. Lakshmana felt in his heart a great longing to go and see Janaka's capital. He was, however, afraid of the Lord and stood in awe of the sage. Therefore he did not openly declare it and smiled within himself. Shri Ramji understood what was passing in his younger brother's mind, and his heart overflowed with a kindly feeling for his devotee. Taking leave of his preceptor to speak, he smilingly spoke with much diffidence in most polite terms. "My lord, Lakshman longs to see the city, but out of fear and respect for you, he does not make it known to you. If I have your permission, I will take him around the city and quickly bring him back." Hearing this, chief of sages, Vishwamitraji, replied in affectionate terms, "It is no wonder, Ramji, that you should respect good manners. You are the upholder of the moral code, my son, and bring joy to your servants out of love of them. Go, blissful pair of brothers, and having seen the city, come back. Bless the eyes of all by showering them with your charming countenance." Saluting the lotus feet of the sage, the two brothers, the delight of the eyes of the whole world, departed. Beholding the exquisite beauty of the two brothers, troops of boys followed them, their eyes and mind being enamored of it. Clad in yellow garments, they had a quiver fastened at their back, with a cloth of the same color wrapped around their waist. Their hands were adorned with a graceful bow and arrow respectively. The beautiful pair, one of whom was dark and the other fair, had streaks of red or white sandalwood paste painted on their body so as to match the complexion. With a neck as well built as the lion's and the long arms, they had on their bosom an exquisite string of pearls obtained from the forehead of elephants. Their lovely eyes resembled the red lotus, and the moon-like face relieved one of the threefold agony. Their ears were adorned with pendants of gold, which stole, as it were, the hearts of those who looked on them. They cast a bewitching glance and had a pair of arched and shapely eyebrows. The lines of the sectarian mark on the forehead looked as if beauty had been sealed there. Their beautiful head was covered with a charming rectangular cap and dark curly locks. The two brothers were lovely from head to foot. Their beauty of every limb was as it should be. When the citizens received the news that the two princes had come to see the town, they all left their business and ran out of their homes as if paupers were out to grab a valuable property. Beholding the natural grace of two brothers, they were glad at heart and attained the consummation of their eyes. Sticking to the air holes of their houses, young ladies lovingly scanned Shri Ramji's beauty. They fondly spoke to one another in the following words: "O friend, he has surpassed in beauty millions of cupids. Nowhere among gods, men, demons, nagas or sages do we hear of such beauty. God Vishnuji is endowed with our forearm. Brahmaji has 4 faces, while Shivji, the slayer of Tripura, has a frightful garb and 5 faces. O friend, there is no other god who could stand comparison with this beauty." The two lads, one dark and the other fair, are yet of tender age and are repositories of beauty and abodes of bliss. Millions and hundreds of millions of cupids are worth sacrificing of each one of their limbs. Tell me, O friend, what embodied being is there that would not be charmed to see such beauty? One of them lovingly said in gentle tones, "Here, my dear, what I have been told. These two lads, a beautiful pair of cygnets, as it were, are sons of King Dashrath. They are the protectors of Kaushika's sacrifice and have slain demons in the field of battle. He who has a swarthy form and has charming lotus-like eyes and who has quelled the pride of Maricha and Subahu, Wielding a bow and shaft in his hands is Kaushalya's son Ramji by name, the very fountain of bliss. The fair youth in gallant attire who is closely following Shri Ramji, a bow and arrow in hand, is the latter's younger brother and is named Lakshmana. Sumitra, my friend, is his mother, you must know. Having accomplished the object of the Brahmana, Vishwamitraji, and redeeming the sage's wife Ahilya on the way, the two brothers have come here to witness the vow sacrifice. All the ladies were delighted to hear this. Beholding Shri Ramji's beauty, someone said, "Here is a bridegroom worthy of Princess Janaki. If the king does but see him, friend, I am sure he will abandon his vow and insist upon their marriage." Said another, "The king has come to know them and has received them as well as the sage with all honor. But the king, my dear, refuses to give up his vow and, as fate would have it, persists in his folly." Yet another said, "If Providence is good and, as we are told, gives every man his due, then Janaki is sure to have him as her bridegroom." About this, my dear, there can be no doubt. If such a union is brought about by Providence, everyone will have realized one's object. My impatience, friend, is augmented by the thought that this alliance will impel him to visit this place again. Otherwise, my dear, it is out of question for us, I tell you, to see him again. Such an event can take place only when we have a rich stock of merit accumulated in previous existences. Someone else said, "Friend, you have spoken well. The union will conducive to the best interests of all." Till another said, "Shankarji's bow is hard to bend, while this swarthy lad is of delicate frame. Everything, my dear, is out of place." Hearing this, another said in a soft voice, "Friend, with regard to this lad, I have heard some people say that though small in appearance, he wields a great power. Touched by the dust of his lotus feet, Ahilya, who had perpetrated a great sin, attained salvation. He will therefore surely break Shivji's vow. One should never commit the mistake of giving up this faith." The same Creator who fashioned Sitaji with great skill has preordained for her this dark-complexioned bridegroom. Everyone was pleased to hear the words of the lady and softly exclaimed, "Amen." In their gladness of heart, troops of fair-faced, bright-eyed dames rained flowers on the princess. Wherever the two brothers went, there was supreme joy. The two brothers reached the eastern quarter of the city, where the arena for the bow sacrifice had been got ready. In the midst of a beautiful and spacious paved area, a spotless altar was richly adorned. On all the four sides of this altar were erected, elevated and broad seats of gold to be occupied by the princess. Not far behind and surrounding them on all sides shone another circular tier of raised seats, which was of somewhat greater height and beautiful in every way, and where the people of the city might come and take their seat. Close to these were constructed spacious and beautiful galleries of glistening white, painted in diverse colors, whence ladies might view the spectacle seated in their appropriate place according to their family rank. The children of the town politely showed the Lord all the preparations, speaking to him in gentle words. Thus, finding an occasion for touching their charming limbs, all the children were overwhelmed with love, experienced a thrill all over their body, and their heart overflowed with joy on seeing the two brothers again and again. Finding all the children under the spell of affection, Shri Ramji lovingly extolled the places shown by them. all of them would call the two brothers wherever they pleased, and the two brothers went to them out of loving kindness. Shri Ramji showed to his younger brother the arrangement that had been made there, speaking to him in soft, sweet and agreeable words. He, in obedience to whose fiat Maya brings forth multitudes of universes in the quarter of a second, the same gracious Lord, conquered by devotion, looks with amazement on the arena for the bow sacrifice. Having seen the whole show, the two brothers returned to their Guru, but the thought of their being late disturbed their mind. The Lord, whose sublimity inspires terror into terror itself, thus manifests the glory of devotion. With many kind of courteous faces, they took leave of the youngsters, much against the latter's will. Meekly and most submissively, with a mingled feeling of awe and love, the two brothers bowed their head at the lotus feet of the preceptor Vishwamitraji and sat down with his permission. At the approach of the night, the sage Vishwamitraji gave the word and all performed their evening devotions. And while the sage recited old legends and narratives, 2 watches of the beautiful night passed. The chief of the sages, Vishwamitraji, then retired to his bed, and the two brothers began to rub his feet. The couple whose lotus feet are sought by men of dispassion, muttering various sacred formulae and practicing different kinds of yoga, means of union with God, lovingly rubbed the lotus-like feet of their Guru, conquered as it were by his love. When the sage asked him again and again, the chief of Raghu's race went to bed only then. Lakshman pressed the Lord's feet to his bosom and caressed them with reverence and love, deriving supreme joy from this service. It was only when the Lord repeatedly said, "Retire now, my brother," that he laid himself down, cherishing his brother's lotus feet in his heart. Towards the close of night, at the sound of cock-crow, got up Lakshman. The Lord of the universe, the all-wise Shri Ramji, also woke before his preceptor. Having performed all the customary acts of purification, they went and finished their ablutions, and having gone through their daily routine of devotions, etc., they bowed before the sage. When the time came, the two brothers took leave of the preceptor and went out to gather flowers. Having gone out, they saw the lovely royal garden, enamored of whose beauty the vernal season had taken its permanent abode there. It was planted with charming trees of various kinds and overhung with beautiful creepers of different colors. Rich in fresh leaf, fruit and flower, they put to shame even celestial trees by their wealth. The feathered choir of the katakas, cuckoos, parrots, and chakoras warbled, and peacocks beautifully danced. In the center of the garden, a lovely lake shone bright with flights of steps made of young colored gems. Its limpid water contained lotuses of various colors and was vocal with the cooing of aquatic birds and the humming of bees. Both the Lord and his brother were delighted to behold the garden with its lake. Most lovely must have been that garden which delighted even Sri Ramji. After looking all about and with the consent of the gardeners, the two brothers began in high glee to gather leaves and flowers. On that very occasion, Sitaji too arrived there, having been sent by her mother to worship Girija. She was accompanied by her girl companions, who were all lovely and intelligent. They sang melodies in an enchanting voice. Close to the lake stood a temple sacred to Girija, which was beautiful beyond description and captivated the mind of those who looked at it. Having taken a dip into the lake with her companions, Sitaji went with a glad heart to Girija's temple. She offered worship with great devotion and begged of the goddess a handsome match worthy of her. One of her companions had strayed away from her in order to have a look at the garden. She chanced to behold the two brothers and returned to Sitaji overwhelmed with love. When her companions saw her condition, her body thrilling all over and her eyes full of tears, they all asked her in gentle tones, "Tell us, what gladdens your heart?" Two princes have come to see the garden, both of tender age and charming every way. One dark of hue and the other fair. How shall I describe them? For speech is sightless while the eyes are mute. All the clever maidens were delighted to hear this. Perceiving the intense longing in Sitaji's bosom, one of them said, "They must be the two princes, my dear, who, I was told, arrived yesterday with the sage Vishwamitraji, and who have captivated the heart of men and women of the city by casting the spell of their beauty. All are talking of their loveliness here, there and everywhere. We must see them, for they are worth seeing." The words of this damsel highly pleased Sitaji. Her eyes were restless for the sight of the princess. With that kind of friend to lead the way she followed, no one knew that hers was an old love. Recollecting Naradji's words, she was filled with innocent love, and with anxious eyes she gazed all round like a startled fawn. Hearing the tinkling of bangles, the small bells tied round the waist and the ankles, Shri Ramji thought within himself, and then said to Lakshman, "It seems as if Cupid has sounded his kettle drum with intent to conquer the universe." So saying, he looked once again in the same direction whence the sound came, and lo, his eyes feasted themselves on Sitaji's countenance, even as the kakora bird gazes on the moon. His charming eyes became motionless, as if Nimi, the god of winking, had left the eyelids out of shyness. Shri Ramji was filled with rapture to behold Sitaji's beauty. He admired it in his heart, but utterance failed him. He felt as if the Creator had put his whole creative skill in visible form and demonstrated it to the world at large. "She lends charm to charm itself," he said to himself, "and looks as if a flame of light is burning in a house of beauty. The similes already employed by the poets are all stale and hackneyed. To which shall I liken the daughter of Videha?"